The arc begins inside a hospital room where Jinwoo and his mother were staying. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the hospital, a head doctor was caught off guard when his colleague rushed in with astonishing news. A patient had miraculously woken up from what was believed to be an irreversible coma. The situation was unprecedented, something unheard of in the medical community. Adding to the shock, the patient's guardian was demanding an immediate discharge, something that went against standard medical procedures. The head doctor, maintaining his professionalism, firmly declined. A patient who had been bedridden for 4 years couldn't possibly be ready to leave. Even if she had regained consciousness, her body would be too weak to support movement. But the colleague, with an almost hesitant tone, revealed something even more baffling. Every single medical test had come back completely normal. The patient showed no signs of muscle atrophy or weakness, as if she had never spent years confined to a hospital bed. She was perfectly healthy and fully capable of walking. The head doctor struggled to understand how such a thing was even possible. Was it some unknown effect of the life-supporting machines? Even if she seemed fine, further observation was necessary. This case needed to be reported and studied. It could change the understanding of modern medicine. However, the colleague, looking uneasy, lowered his voice and mentioned something else. The guardian, demanding the discharge, wasn't an ordinary person. Then, in a hushed whisper, he asked if the head doctor had heard of a man named Sung Jinwoo, the country's newest rank hunter. The moment that name was spoken, a chill ran down the head doctor's spine. His stern resolve wavered, and in an instant, his attitude shifted. He quickly turned back toward the paperwork, suddenly agreeing that it would be unreasonable to keep a perfectly healthy patient in the hospital any longer. With that, he authorized the immediate discharge. Meanwhile, in the hospital room, Jinwoo's younger sister, Jinna, had just arrived. The moment their mother saw her, she was overwhelmed with emotion. It had been years since they last spoke, and now, face to face, she marveled at how much Jinna had grown. Jinna, on the other hand, was too choked up with emotion to say much. Overcome with relief, she rushed forward and embraced her mother tightly. Jinwoo stood back, watching the reunion unfold. A deep sense of fulfillment settled over him. This moment, this happiness, was something he had fought for. After everything he had endured, it finally felt like he was being rewarded. But at the same time, an unsettling feeling gnawed at him. He had already crossed a line. His path as a hunter meant that a peaceful life was no longer within reach. Later, outside the hospital, Jinwoo sat on a bench, scrolling through his phone. After spending so much time inside the castle, he hadn't been able to check his messages. He noticed several missed calls, but figured that if something was urgent, the person would try again. As he skimmed through the news, one article caught his attention. His eyes widened when he saw Kaisel's name mentioned. The article detailed reports of a strange creature flying above Seoul. Authorities had ruled out a dungeon break since there was no evidence of a breach. However, concerns were growing over whether the Hunters Association was failing to maintain control. As he was processing this information, his phone buzzed again. The caller ID showed a familiar name, Chairman Go. Answering the call, Jinwoo was greeted by a serious tone. The chairman asked if Jinwoo had seen the news, implying that he was already aware of the situation. Assuming it was about Kaisel, Jinwoo admitted that he hadn't been keeping up and assured Chairman Go that he would be more careful in the future. However, there was a pause on the other end. Chairman Go seemed momentarily confused before asking again if Jinwoo really hadn't heard the news. Jinwoo hesitated. If the chairman wasn't talking about Kaisel, then what was he referring to? He explained that he had been off the grid, with no access to his phone. Realizing that Jinwoo was still unaware, Chairman Go suggested meeting in person to explain everything. But Jinwoo, eager to get straight to the point, decided to go to the Hunters Association himself. At the association headquarters, Jinwoo met with Chairman Go, who wasted no time in getting to the main issue. In just 4 days, a large-scale operation was set to begin. A mission to reclaim Jeju Island by eliminating the ant colony that had overrun it. It was an operation of national importance, and Jinwoo's participation was being requested. For a moment, Jinwoo considered the opportunity. A raid like this was exactly what he needed, a chance to face high-level monsters and gain experience. It was an ideal situation for leveling up. However, another thought quickly followed. His mother had just woken up after years in a coma. Leaving her so soon after her recovery didn't sit right with him. Before he could give an answer, Jinwoo suddenly tensed. A powerful surge of mana rippled through the air. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. Somewhere nearby, hunters were engaged in battle. Chairman Go, noticing Jinwoo's reaction, smiled and acknowledged his sharp senses. He explained that the energy was coming from the training area, where S-rank hunters were warming up for the upcoming raid. Among them were the elite Japanese hunters who had traveled to Korea for this mission. One name stood out, Goto Ryuji. Hearing that name, Jinwoo's expression changed. He knew exactly who that was. Goto Ryuji wasn't just any hunter. He was Japan's strongest S-rank, a man whose reputation extended far beyond his home country. Even people who weren't involved in the hunting world knew his name. A realization settled over Jinwoo. This mission wasn't just about reclaiming Jeju Island. There was something more at play here, something that involved hunters of the highest caliber, and he was about to find himself right in the middle of it. Chairman Go then suggested that Jinwoo visit the gym. The scene transitioned to the training area, where Baek Yunho was engaged in an intense sparring session with another hunter. Yunho attempted to land a powerful strike, but his opponent intercepted the blow, gripping his hand and sending a shockwave through the room. With a swift motion, the opponent shoved Yunho's shoulder and swept his leg, knocking him to the ground effortlessly. The opponent expressed his disappointment in Yunho's strength, making it clear that he expected more from him. However, Yunho simply smiled and continued the fight without hesitation. The two clashed once more, each strike causing a resounding impact as they tested each other's limits. Meanwhile, Jinwoo and Chairman Go arrived at the gym, taking in the sight of the many elite hunters gathered in one place. Chairman Go noted that it was rare to witness such a strong assembly of S-rank hunters and speculated that the intense mana waves Jinwoo had sensed earlier had likely originated from here. Jinwoo observed the battle and noticed that Yunho appeared to be struggling against his opponent. As if confirming his thoughts, a voice spoke up, stating that Yunho wasn't actually fighting at full strength. If he were, his opponent wouldn't stand a chance. Turning to the source of the voice, Jinwoo saw that Choi Jong-in had entered the gym. Jong-in greeted him and introduced the fighter sparring with Yunho as Ma Dong-wook, the leader of the Fame Guild, one of the top 5 guilds in South Korea and ranked as the 4th strongest in the country. Curious, Jinwoo questioned why Yunho was holding back, despite seeming capable of overpowering his opponent. Zhang Jian, standing nearby, explained that Yunho had an audience watching. Using his full power in front of so many people would put him in an awkward situation, especially considering his transformation ability. Jinwoo realized that the rumors about Yunho's monstrous transformation were indeed true. Jong-in then pointed toward another group, introducing them as the Japanese rank hunters. One by one, he listed their names: Izawa Ippei, Ishida Mari, Tanaka Kenzo, Hashino Minoru, Kumamoto Atsushi, Tawara Kanon, Fujishima Tatsumi, Kei, Shimizu Ikari, and finally, Goto. Jinwoo's attention was immediately drawn to one man standing at a distance. He had heard about Goto Ryuji before, but had never seen him in person. Meanwhile, across the gym, a Japanese hunter named Akari asked Hanekawa about Jinwoo's identity. Hanekawa responded, explaining that he was South Korea's newest rank hunter, having recently awakened to his powers. Goto Ryuji had also taken notice of Jinwoo and speculated about his abilities. He initially assumed that Jinwoo might be an assassin-type hunter. However, if that were the case, his presence wouldn't be so easily detectable. This led Ryuji to conclude that Jinwoo must be an extraordinarily skilled assassin. Hanekawa, overhearing his thoughts, clarified that Jinwoo was actually classified as a mage hunter. Ryuji found this hard to believe, insisting that it seemed impossible given his aura. However, Hanekawa reaffirmed that the official records confirmed him as a mage. Elsewhere, Lim Tae-gyu noticed Jinwoo and asked Cha Haein if he was the hunter responsible for disrupting Min Sung's debut. As she turned her gaze toward Jinwoo, Haein couldn't shake the feeling that his presence was affecting the atmosphere in an unusual way. Meanwhile, two Japanese hunters, Kei and Ishida, were also discussing Jinwoo. Ishida pointed him out, mentioning that he was Korea's 10th rank hunter. However, Kei showed little interest, stating that he felt sick just being surrounded by so many S-rank hunters. He then turned his attention to Heian, noting her refined sense of smell and comparing it to his own. She constantly covered her nose with a handkerchief, a habit he found interesting. He briefly considered speaking to her but hesitated, worried she might misinterpret his intentions. He regretted not learning Korean before the trip. The fight between Yoonho and Dongwook continued, their powerful clashes drawing attention from the onlookers. Observing the match, Hanekawa turned to Goto Ryuji and questioned whether these hunters were truly considered South Korea's strongest. She found their performance underwhelming and remarked that they seemed mediocre at best. The discussion between Ryuji and Hanekawa continued as they observed the South Korean hunters. Hanekawa expressed her opinion, stating that after closely watching their past raids, she was no longer impressed by the S-rank hunters. However, Ryuji disagreed, pointing out that there was at least one remarkable hunter among them, Cha Hae-in. He believed that she, along with Chairman Go, could give Japan's top hunters a serious challenge. As they spoke, a South Korean hunter approached Hanekawa. He addressed her as Mrs. Interpreter and questioned if she truly believed that South Korea's S-rank hunters were average. He also noted that she probably assumed no one around her understood Japanese. However, he revealed that he had studied the language in high school, making it his second language. His companion, standing beside him, cheered him on, calling him boss and encouraging him. Curious about the hunter's identity, Hanekawa asked who he was. His companion proudly introduced him as Park Jung-soo, an A-rank hunter and the guildmaster of the Knights Guild. Hanekawa admitted that she had never heard of him, which irritated his companion Yoon-tae. He quickly clarified that Jung-soo was an A-rank, not an S-rank, which might explain why she was unfamiliar with him. He then added that the Knights Guild was one of the 5 major guilds in South Korea and had the highest number of A-rank hunters. Jung-soo, however, gestured for Yoon-tae to stop boasting, but the conversation continued. Hanekawa asked if they would be participating in the upcoming Jeju Island raid. She had heard that only S-rank hunters were allowed to join. Ryuji, now intrigued, asked her to explain further. Yoon-tae immediately defended Jung-soo, stating that he was part of the defense team responsible for securing the island's perimeter. Hanekawa responded in a neutral tone, saying it was good to know. However, she added that assigning an important task to an A-rank hunter wouldn't be wise. Her words further agitated Yoon-tae, but before he could respond, Ryuji turned to Hanekawa and warned her to be more respectful in her speech. Despite the tension, Jung-soo remained composed. He told Hanekawa to stop underestimating him just because she was an interpreter. Now slightly irritated, Hanekawa challenged him, asking if he wanted to prove himself. She then revealed that she wasn't just an interpreter, but an A-rank hunter as well. She smirked and questioned if he was afraid to take on someone like her. With that, she removed her suit, unleashing a powerful aura that caused the surrounding hunters to take notice. Jung-soo, unfazed, sighed and asked her to stop provoking him. He was about to walk away when Hanekawa sarcastically asked if he was a non-combatant hunter, implying that his refusal to fight meant he lacked real battle experience. This remark finally pushed Jung-soo over the edge and he accepted the challenge. However, he proposed a simple rule: the first person to grab their opponent's wrist would be the winner. Hanekawa understood that even if she launched an attack, the fight would end the moment her wrist was caught. She realized that this match would be more about strategy than brute force. As they prepared, Hanekawa observed Jung-soo's stance. He stood calmly with one hand in his pocket, radiating confidence. He reassured her that he would only take his hand out when it was time to grab her wrist. Hanekawa noted that he must be incredibly fast if he was that self-assured. Without wasting time, she charged at Jung-soo, launching a rapid series of attacks. However, he easily dodged every single strike, his movements smooth and precise. Frustrated, Hanekawa became determined to wipe the smug look off his face. She went for another attack, but with a well-timed kick, Jung-soo knocked her hand away, halting her momentum. Jung-soo calmly stated that he hadn't hit her. It was just a small push. Hanekawa, annoyed, sarcastically apologized and mocked his accent. She also made fun of his torn pants, implying that he was trying too hard to look cool. Suddenly, she lunged at him again, thinking she had found an opening. However, before she could react, Jong-soo swiftly grabbed her wrist. The match was over. Hanakawa froze, not understanding how he had moved so fast. Holding her wrist firmly, Jong-soo looked at her and repeated her earlier words mockingly. He pointed out that she seemed inexperienced in one-on-one fights. He explained that in South Korea, hunters sometimes had to fight their own kind, and in extreme cases even kill them. Unlike magic beasts, humans didn't move predictably. If she couldn't anticipate her opponent's next move, she wouldn't survive. To emphasize his point, he added that if he had been holding a sword instead of her wrist, he would have cut her throat by now. Hanakawa pulled her hand away, visibly irritated by his words. Ryuji, stepping in to break the tension, thanked them for the match. He then turned to Hanakawa and instructed her to deliver his message to the rest of the group. In an effort to strengthen trust between the two countries, Ryuji proposed a sparring session between S-rank hunters, following the same rules as the match between Jong-soo and Hanakawa. Chairman Go entered the conversation and immediately approved of the idea, adding that it would be a valuable experience. However, he pointed out that mage-type and non-combatant hunters should be excluded, since it would be difficult to determine a clear winner in their case. Baek Yoon-ho then suggested additional rules to make the match more structured. He proposed that grabbing an opponent's wrist, back, or knocking them down should result in an automatic win. Additionally, instead of one-on-one duels, multiple hunters should participate in a group battle. Once Hanakawa translated these new conditions to Ryuji, he took a moment to analyze the situation. He recognized that taking out even one person early in the fight could drastically change the outcome. He also realized that assassin punch hunters would have a major advantage under these rules. Despite this, he agreed to the proposal, responding confidently, "All right, sounds good." With the rules set, the teams were finalized. Representing South Korea were S-rank hunters Baek Yoon-ho, Ma Dong-wook, Cha Hae-in, and Lim Tae-gyu. On the Japanese side, the selected S-rank hunters were Tanaka Kenzo, Hashino Minoru, Kumamoto Atsushi, and Tawada Kene. The stage was set for an intense showdown. As the battle was about to begin, Jinwoo noticed something interesting. Goto Ryuji himself was not participating in the sparring match. This made him wonder if Ryuji simply wanted to observe the strength of South Korea's top hunters firsthand. He also realized that fights between S-rank hunters were incredibly rare, making this an opportunity he was glad to witness. Kenzo, one of the Japanese hunters, analyzed his opponents, believing he had a decent grasp of Dongwook and Baek Yoon-ho's abilities from their earlier battles. However, he had a strong suspicion that Baek Yoon-ho was still keeping something hidden. Meanwhile, Tawada assumed that since this was a 4-on-4 fight, her opponent would likely be Cha Hae-in, the only female hunter on the opposing team. On the other side, Lim Tae-gyu silently hoped that the Japanese hunters wouldn't be too ruthless, despite knowing how formidable they were. Ma Dong-wook, eager for the fight, grinned widely and urged everyone to begin. It was clear that the South Korean team was more than ready. Kenzo smirked, intrigued by Dong-wook's ability to enlarge his body. He appreciated straightforward battles and found excitement in a test of pure strength. "Nice. Very nice. I like that you keep it simple," he remarked, releasing a powerful aura. As if responding to his energy, Dong-wook also unleashed his power. Both fighters then charged at each other with full force, fists colliding in an explosion of energy, each determined to prove their strength. At the same time, Minoru made his move against Tae-gyu, who was caught off guard by his opponent's incredible speed. Tae-gyu immediately recognized that Minoru specialized in close-quarters combat, which put him at a disadvantage. However, he was confident in his own strengths, specifically his ability to create distance. Without hesitation, he released a powerful magic arrow, aiming not only at Minoru, but also at his teammates. As Minoru dodged the attack, he was stunned to realize that it was a strategy to disrupt their entire formation. Watching from a distance, Atsushi immediately understood the tactic. "So, he's a ranger," he muttered, realizing that the South Korean team had no intention of sticking to one-on-one fights. Kenzo quickly assessed the situation and concluded that their only viable option was for Minoru to take down Taegyu as fast as possible before more damage was done. From the sidelines, Chairman Go observed the battle with keen interest. He noted that the facility had been reinforced with high-quality essence stones designed to withstand powerful attacks. Normally, an average hunter would struggle to even leave a dent in the walls. Yet, within mere seconds of the match beginning, the entire area had been torn apart by the sheer force of the combatants. He found it unfortunate that these young hunters, despite their incredible talent, were often sent into battles they weren't fully prepared for. Meanwhile, Baek Yoonho was deep in thought. He understood that their opponents were among the strongest S ranks in the world, and this match wasn't just about skill, it was about survival. He knew they had to be prepared not just to grab an opponent's wrist, but, if necessary, to break it. His opponent, Atsushi, on the other hand, saw things differently. He believed that following the set rules was pointless. In his mind, the only true law of battle was survival of the fittest. Instead of aiming for Yuno's wrist or back, he planned to strike wherever it would hurt the most. Atsushi made his move, swiftly positioning himself behind Yunoho, preparing for a decisive strike. However, just as he was about to land his attack, he suddenly hesitated and leaped away. Yunoho, puzzled, wondered why his opponent had backed off. Is he afraid? He thought to himself. Meanwhile, Atsushi clenched his fists in frustration, questioning whether he truly had the killer instinct needed to survive in this world. The battle raged on, each hunter pushing their limits, their every move shaping the outcome of this high-stakes confrontation. As Yoonho observed his opponent, he couldn't help but question the man's true nature. Was he someone with great strategic thinking, or was he simply a coward avoiding unnecessary risks? This led him to reflect on his previous belief that the desire to fight was essential for a hunter. Perhaps he had been wrong. However, another thought quickly surfaced. It seemed that Ryuji was deliberately setting up fights among the S-rank hunters. He wasn't just letting them test their abilities, he was using them as a means to evaluate Atsushi's strength, to see if he was ready for the upcoming battle against the ants. Realizing they were merely being used as test subjects, Yoonho decided he wouldn't hold back anymore. He wanted to give his opponents a glimpse of his true strength. As his form began to change, Atsushi noticed it immediately. A sense of fear crept over him, and he hesitated, his body screaming at him to retreat. But before he could act, Yoonho launched forward at an astonishing speed, calling Atsushi a coward and expressing his disappointment that such a man was considered among the top hunters. His attack came down in an instant, barely missing its target as Atsushi dodged at the last possible second. Elsewhere, Jiangsu watched the unfolding battle with fascination. He couldn't help but remark that this was no ordinary fight. It was a monstrous clash, one that made his own previous match seem insignificant. However, Yun-tae disagreed. He dismissed the idea, insisting that Jiangsu had been just as impressive in his earlier battle. Before their conversation could continue, a loud impact resonated through the area. Dongbuk had been defeated. Kenzo, standing tall over him, smirked and confidently declared himself the stronger one between the two. Dongbuk, still in shock, lay on the ground, unable to believe that he had just been overpowered so decisively. He had never experienced such a crushing defeat before. Meanwhile, another battle was reaching its climax. Taegyu had been completely overwhelmed by Minoru, who now stood victorious after sending his opponent crashing into a wall. Without hesitation, Minoru announced his triumph. Yoonho turned his attention to the remaining opponents, questioning if they now saw him as their next target. He knew what they were thinking, that he would be easier to defeat than the others. With a calm but firm voice, he told them they had underestimated him. Meanwhile, on another side of the battlefield, Tawada was struggling against Heian. Initially, Tawada believed Heian relied solely on speed, but that assumption was quickly proven wrong. She couldn't predict Heian's movements at all. It was as if Heian was moving in an entirely different rhythm, one that was unreadable. Then, Heian's aura suddenly intensified, sending a chill down Tawada's spine. At that moment, she recalled the infamous nickname given to Heian, the Dancer. It was a name earned due to the way she effortlessly eliminated her enemies, her movements appearing more like a graceful dance than a brutal fight. However, Heian had always hated that name and had it banned. Before Tawada could react, Heian launched into a relentless assault, striking with rapid precision. Tawada attempted to counterattack, but Heian disrupted her rhythm with a single, well-placed slash, knocking off her cap. Then, in an instant, Heian vanished from view only to reappear behind her. A light tap on her back signaled the end of the battle. Tawada had lost. Heian didn't waste any time celebrating. She had to move quickly. She needed to assist Yun-ho. However, just as she turned to leave, Atsushi appeared behind her, ready to strike. He had been waiting for this moment, hoping that with Yun-ho occupied, he could eliminate Heian without interference. But before he could make his move, Heian reacted with an overwhelming burst of attacks, striking him repeatedly in the face. The watching Japanese hunters were left speechless. Fujishima could only compare her assault to the rapid-fire speed of a Gatling gun. Ishida, watching closely, tried to count the number of punches but couldn't keep up. He estimated that she had struck Atsushi at least 10 to 14 times in the blink of an eye. Atsushi staggered back, his face bloodied and unrecognizable. However, something was different about him now. His teammates immediately noticed the shift. His body language changed, his rational mind slipping away. Kei muttered that Atsushi had entered a dangerous state. When enraged, he became an entirely different person, unable to control himself. Ishida added that after his rage subsided, he would remember nothing. This was why Atsushi had never been considered suitable for elite strike squads. Despite his immense power, he lacked the ability to work with others, even struggling to clear an A-rank gate as part of a team. Alone, he could handle B-rank threats with ease, but in coordinated battles, he was a liability. Heian, on the other hand, was taken aback by the sheer force of her own attack. She had reacted instinctively. Watching from afar, Ryuji observed the situation carefully. If Atsushi lost control completely and attacked one of the South Korean hunters, they would have no choice but to stop him immediately. However, he decided to wait. This was still a test, and he wanted to see what would happen next. Hanakawa, standing nearby, questioned whether this was the right moment to intervene. If Atsushi went on a rampage, the destruction would be costly, and they couldn't afford unnecessary damage. As the battle continued, Heian barely managed to dodge another attack, but she quickly realized that her opponent had become far more dangerous. His speed had increased dramatically, and before she knew it, he was right behind her, closing in for a devastating strike. But just as the attack was about to land, an explosion of energy erupted between them, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Atsushi froze, caught off guard by the sudden force. Standing at the center of the commotion was none other than Sung Jinwoo. He had intervened. Jinwoo calmly assessed the situation. He apologized for stepping in, but made it clear that things had gone too far. This was no longer just a sparring match. It had turned into something else entirely. Holding Atsushi's foot with one hand and steadying Heian with the other, he demonstrated complete control over the situation. Heian looked up at him in surprise, realizing just how effortlessly he had stopped the fight. Still seething with rage, Atsushi cursed Jinwoo and attempted another reckless attack, but it was pointless. With little effort, Jinwoo dodged and reversed the momentum, slamming Atsushi straight into the ground. The impact left a crater beneath him. Ryuji, who had been closely observing Jinwoo's movements, narrowed his eyes. He turned to Hanakawa and asked if Sung Jinwoo was truly classified as a mage hunter. Hanakawa hesitated before confirming that according to official records, yes, that was the classification given to him. But after witnessing what had just happened, Ryuji knew there was much more to Sung Jinwoo than the reports suggested. Ryuji decided that the best way to confirm his suspicions was to check firsthand. Meanwhile, Jinwoo swiftly restrained Atsushi, pinning him to the ground with firm control. After assessing the situation, he suggested to Heian that they accept the match as a loss for the South Korean team, a conclusion that was readily agreed upon. It became evident that Yun-ho had already faced defeat, now firmly held by Kenzo. Despite his exceptional abilities, he recognized the overwhelming strength of the Japanese hunters. Even if he chose to unleash his transformation, the gap in power seemed insurmountable. Before he could dwell further on his limitations, Hanakawa approached, calling out to Jinwoo and informing him that Ryuji wished to speak with him. As Jinwoo turned his attention toward Ryuji, the atmosphere grew tense. Ryuji confirmed Jinwoo's name, ensuring he was indeed the hunter he had heard about. Without hesitation, an intense aura radiated from Ryuji, signaling his intent to fight. He issued a challenge, making it clear that he wanted a one-on-one duel. The moment froze as their gazes locked, anticipation filling the air. Jinwoo immediately sensed Ryuji's eagerness for battle. Even without a translator, the message was clear. Ryuji wanted to test his abilities. Though uncertain of Ryuji's true motives, Jinwoo saw this as an opportunity to measure his own growth, especially after his experiences in the Demon Castle. Ryuji, observing Jinwoo's composed demeanor, was momentarily caught off guard when he noticed a subtle smile forming on his opponent's face. This reaction puzzled him. Few hunters had ever dared to smile in his presence. Hanekawa translated Jinwoo's response, stating that he was willing to fight but with one condition. Ryuji had to use his full strength. The demand took Ryuji by surprise, his expression shifting between amusement and irritation. The sheer confidence in Jinwoo's words made him question whether his opponent was being reckless or if there was something more beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Lim Taegu, watching from the sidelines, struggled to grasp what was happening. Haein, equally taken aback, found it difficult to believe what she had just heard. Realizing that the match would proceed, Ryuji acknowledged the challenge. With an S-rank healer present, he reasoned that injuries wouldn't be a major concern. He signaled the healer to stand by, ensuring they would assist anyone wounded, including himself. With a confident gesture, he pointed at Jinwoo and warned that the healer's aid would be needed shortly. From a distance, Dongwil observed with curiosity and asked Haein if Jinwoo was the rumored 10th S-rank hunter. He wondered if Jinwoo was truly going to face Ryuji in direct combat. Dongwil muttered to himself about Jinwoo's audacity, unsure whether it was bravery or recklessness. Meanwhile, Haein reflected on Jinwoo's previous battles, recalling his remarkable victory over an A-rank dungeon boss and an overwhelming number of high-level orcs. Yunho, standing beside her, noticed her unease and asked if she felt comfortable being around the Japanese hunters. Haein admitted that she couldn't always shield herself from their presence, especially with the upcoming mission on Jeju Island. She then turned the conversation back to Jinwoo, inquiring about his relationship with Yunho. He quickly confirmed that he knew Jinwoo well. Curious, she questioned why Yunho wasn't intervening to prevent Jinwoo from facing Ryuji. Yunho admitted that under normal circumstances, he would have stepped in, given Ryuji's reputation. However, he had chosen not to, his reasoning aligning with Haeyeon's own thoughts. His words caught her off guard, making her pause for a moment. Yunho smiled knowingly, suggesting that she too was looking forward to witnessing the battle unfold. As Jinwoo prepared himself, the fight was about to begin. He barely had time to utter a word before Ryuji launched his first attack. Without hesitation, Ryuji's hand moved with lightning speed, unleashing a powerful strike that sent shockwaves through the area. The impact caused a resounding explosion, but Jinwoo dodged effortlessly, narrowly avoiding the devastating force. He realized that Ryuji had wasted no time, attacking the very moment he declared the match had begun. Ryuji looked at his hand in confusion, unable to comprehend how he had missed his strike. He had been told that Jinwoo was a mage-type hunter, but something about his movements felt different. His agility, his silent footsteps, none of it aligned with what was expected from a mage. While others might be fooled by the assumption, Ryuji was not convinced. He was determined to expose Jinwoo and reveal his true nature. Jinwoo, on the other hand, recognized that Ryuji was an entirely different caliber of S-rank hunter. However, he was still confident in his ability to dodge the attacks. Ryuji's strikes came relentlessly, one after another, yet Jinwoo evaded each one effortlessly, a smile forming on his face. The sight of Jinwoo's amusement only fueled Ryuji's frustration. Nearby, another Japanese hunter, Izawa, asked Kenzu if they should intervene, but Kenzu observed that Ryuji was taking the fight seriously. Lim Taegyo watched in awe, commenting on how intense their battle was. Even with his trained eyes, it was difficult to track their movements. Dongwook was equally impressed, noting that despite facing one of Japan's strongest hunters, Jinwoo was avoiding every attack with ease. However, Haeyeon saw something more. Jinwoo was not merely dodging, he was allowing Ryuji to continue his assault, studying his attacks and movements. Jong-in, returning from a brief break, noticed the commotion and remarked that it looked like an interesting fight had broken out in his absence. Meanwhile, Ryuji started to question whether Jinwoo was simply lucky or if he possessed an ability that allowed him to anticipate attacks. It became clear that unless he gave his all, he might never land a solid hit. Determined, he resolved to unleash his full strength and eliminate Jinwoo. In that instant, Jinwoo's system alerted him of an approaching enemy with murderous intent. Before he could react, a sharp cut appeared on Jinwoo's cheek as Ryuji launched another devastating strike. The sheer force sent shockwaves through the air. However, Ryuji was stunned when Jinwoo effortlessly caught his hand mid-strike. Realizing the danger, Jinwoo knew that if he continued to hold back, he might end up in a dire situation similar to his past battles. Ryuji was shocked not only by Jinwoo's strength, but also by his precise control. He realized that Jinwoo could have grabbed his wrist, disabling his attack, but instead he chose to hold his hand, sending a clear message. Enraged, Ryuji felt as if he was being toyed with. As tension built, both fighters released their powerful auras, ready to strike with everything they had. The hunters watching were overwhelmed by the sheer pressure radiating from them. Just before they could engage again, Yunho and Kei intervened. Hashino held Ryuji back, while Kei quickly constructed an ice wall between them to forcefully halt the fight. Yunho, now in control of the situation, pointed out that things had gone too far. He reminded Jinwoo that Ryuji was responsible for leading the Japanese forces in the coming days, and any unnecessary injuries could have serious consequences. Hyen agreed, emphasizing that no one could afford to deal with the aftermath if Ryuji were seriously harmed. Seeing the situation escalate, Hanikawa announced that the sparring session was over. As the tension settled, Yunho turned to Jinwoo, asking if he had crossed any lines. Jinwoo simply smiled, assuring him that everything was fine. Dongwook, still amazed by what he had witnessed, praised Jinwoo's performance. Despite facing one of the most powerful hunters, Jinwoo had emerged with nothing but a minor cut. He then mentioned that his guild had plenty of mages but lacked fighters, suggesting that Jinwoo should consider joining them if he wasn't already affiliated with a guild. Jong-in, overhearing the conversation, reaffirmed that Jinwoo was a mage-type hunter, leaving Jongwoo momentarily speechless. Meanwhile, Jinwoo reflected on his experience. He had now crossed paths with several top-ranking figures: Chairman Go, Choi Jong-in, Cha Hyen, Baek Yunho, and now Goto Ryuji. Even among these elite hunters, none had noticed his hidden soldiers lurking in the shadows, not even Ryuji. Suddenly, Jinwoo turned to Chairman Go and directly asked if he wanted him to participate in the Jeju Island raid. Taken aback, Chairman Go realized that Jinwoo had already made his decision. As the realization sank in, Hanekawa called out Ryuji's name, concern evident in her voice. She saw him standing still, drenched in sweat, his face pale after his encounter with Jinwoo. Back at the White Tiger Guild office, Bak Yunho sat in silence, letting out a deep sigh. After witnessing Jinwoo's overwhelming strength firsthand, he couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and anticipation for what was to come. Yunho had always known that hunters could grow stronger, but witnessing it firsthand was something else entirely. He couldn't shake the thought of Jinwoo's true potential. If this hunter continued to develop at such a rapid pace, his value would be immeasurable. While Yunho had initially hoped to recruit Jinwoo into his guild, he realized that such an effort might have been futile. However, there were always other ways to build a connection with someone so talented. Deciding to take a different approach, he checked his phone and reviewed the official list of hunters set to participate in the upcoming Search and Destroy mission. To his surprise, Jinwoo's name was nowhere to be found. He frowned, puzzled by the omission. It didn't make sense to leave out such a powerful hunter. Meanwhile, in his hotel room, Goto Ryuji was on a call with Sugimoto Reiji, the vice guildmaster of the Blade Guild and an S-rank hunter. During their conversation, Ryuji casually mentioned that South Korea seemed to have an unexpectedly strong hunter. Sugimoto laughed at the thought, dismissing the idea that anyone there could rival him. However, Ryuji wasn't so sure. He had seen something different, something that couldn't be ignored. Curious, Sugimoto asked for the hunter's name. Ryuji revealed that it was Sung Jinwoo, a recently evaluated S-rank hunter who had undergone a second awakening. Sugimoto found this odd considering that Jinwoo's name wasn't on the official list of participants. When Ryuji pressed for an explanation, Sugimoto explained that South Korea had already selected their representatives for the Jeju Island raid. The team included Choi Jong-in, Ma Dong-wook, Bak Yoon-ho, Cha Hye-in, Lim Tae-gyu, and Min Byung-gu, some of the country's strongest hunters. It was hard to believe that Jinwoo had been left out of such an important mission. Ryuji couldn't fathom why Chairman Go would make such a decision. Sugimoto reassured him that there was no need to worry. With 16 S-rank hunters participating in total, the operation would be a success regardless. Accepting the explanation, Ryuji decided to set aside his concerns. He ended the call, making a mental note to reach out to Sugimoto again once the raid began. Far from the bustling city, deep within Halasan's Bungnok Crater Lake, the Ant Queen surveyed her kingdom. The colony had reached a breaking point. With food supplies running dangerously low, the weaker ants had begun devouring each other in desperation. The queen knew they couldn't stay confined to the island any longer. To ensure survival, she made a decision. A new soldier would be born, one unlike any before. Before her lay an enormous egg, pulsating with energy. This would be the first of a new breed of warriors, one destined to lead the colony and strike fear into their enemies. As the egg trembled, the queen commanded the emerging soldier to consume everything in sight, to grow stronger, and to instill terror in all who opposed them. The moment the creature broke free, it let out an ear-splitting screech, shaking the very foundation of the ant kingdom. The queen watched with satisfaction as an overwhelming aura spread throughout the colony. This was her child, and it would be unstoppable. Back in the city, Jinwoo returned home with his mother and younger sister Gina. The familiar sight of their apartment greeted them, though it was far messier than he remembered. The place had been left untouched during his time in the Demon Castle, and it showed. Gina groaned at the mess while Jinwoo playfully pinched her cheek. Their mother, smiling, reminded them that it had been 4 years since she last did any housework. She suggested they clean together, and Jinwoo agreed with a chuckle. As they worked, his mother commented on how worn down the apartment had become. The layers of dust and grime hinted at years of neglect. While tidying up, she suddenly asked if there had been any news about Jinwoo's father. Her voice held a quiet hope, but Jinwoo could only shake his head. He wished he had an answer for her, but there had been nothing. As he continued cleaning, he found himself lost in thought. If his mother knew just how much he had changed, how he had followed in his father's footsteps, he wondered what she would think. Jinwoo knew that his mother's decision to remain in their old apartment had nothing to do with money. Even though he was now wealthier than most people could ever hope to be, she refused to move. The reason was simple. She was still waiting for his father. No matter how much time passed, she held on to the belief that one day he would return. This thought lingered in Jinwoo's mind. He realized how much his mother and sister needed him. Though he had gained immense power, there were things beyond strength that weighed on his heart. As he stood in their home, his thoughts gradually shifted toward the upcoming Jeju Island raid. Meanwhile, a press conference was being held to address the growing threat on Jeju Island. A researcher presented a shocking discovery. The ants inhabiting the island were evolving at an incredible speed. A video was shown, documenting the changes that had taken place over time. At the beginning of the infestation, the creatures resembled oversized ants, crawling on all 6 legs. However, images from later missions revealed something alarming. By the time of the 3rd Search and Destroy mission, the ants had begun standing upright, their bodies adapting to a more human-like posture. Their heads had even shrunk, allowing for greater agility. The most disturbing development, however, was the appearance of wings. The researcher confirmed that the ants were now capable of flight, making them an even greater threat. This was the primary reason why South Korea and Japan had agreed to form a joint team for the mission. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Some attendees voiced their concerns, admitting that even the most skilled hunters might hesitate to face such terrifying creatures. Despite the fear surrounding the mission, there was also admiration for those who had stepped forward. One person in the audience mentioned that a retired hunter had even volunteered to join the fight, earning the respect of many. Elsewhere, Jinwoo was reading through online comments, most of which were filled with criticism. Many people questioned why his name wasn't on the list for the Jeju Island raid. Some mocked him, claiming he was still the same weak E-rank hunter he had once been. Others pointed out that even a retired hunter had joined the mission, yet Jinwoo was nowhere to be seen. One comment in particular stood out. It suggested that Jinwoo had run away after becoming an S-rank, calling it embarrassing. Though he didn't care about the hate, he couldn't help but think about his younger sister, Gina. The last thing he wanted was for her to be affected by the negativity surrounding him. While lost in thought, his phone rang. It was Jinwoo, calling to update him on his living situation. Jinwoo had finally moved out of the motel and found an apartment with his mother's help. He had also secured an office space for their guild and wanted Jinwoo to check it out. When Jinwoo arrived, Jinwoo eagerly explained that a guild needed an official office, so he had chosen a location close to their apartments. Looking around, Jinwoo noted that the space seemed too large for just the two of them. However, Jinwoo reminded him that a guild required at least 3 hunters, a guild master, a vice guild master, and 1 additional member. Realizing he would need to recruit more hunters, Jinwoo briefly considered simply filling the position with any available candidate. But before he could dwell on the thought, Jinwoo handed him a business card. A foreigner had been looking for him and would remain in Korea until July 17th. Jinwoo found it odd that a stranger knew of him and wanted to meet. Just as he processed this information, an uneasy feeling crept over him. Without warning, he suddenly announced that he had to go home. Jinwoo, caught off guard, asked what was happening, but before he could get an answer, Jinwoo vanished, using his teleportation ability. The scene shifted to a dark alleyway near Jinwoo's neighborhood. A thug was holding a knife to a young girl, threatening her not to scream. He had a twisted grin on his face as he taunted her, enjoying the fear in her eyes. He boasted about how crime was rampant in the area, making it easy to do whatever he pleased. Just then, a voice spoke from behind him. Someone casually agreed with his statement, adding that they too enjoyed the neighborhood. The thug, startled, turned to see who had interrupted. Jinwoo stood there, his expression unreadable. The thug sneered, questioning why he was interfering. With a smug attitude, he revealed that he didn't need a reason. He simply found hurting others to be fun. Without hesitation, he lunged at Jinwoo, his knife flashing under the dim streetlights. Grabbing Jinwoo's shoulder, he stabbed him multiple times, expecting his victim to crumble. It was the same thrill he always felt when preying on someone weaker than him. But this time, things wouldn't go the way he expected. The blade had no effect. Jinwoo calmly spoke, almost as if reminiscing. Once someone gets a taste of something, returning to an ordinary life isn't easy. Before the thug could comprehend what was happening, his legs were suddenly slashed out from under him. As he collapsed, trembling, realization dawned. This was no ordinary man. The girl wasted no time. She turned and fled, disappearing into the night. Meanwhile, Jinwoo loomed over the fallen criminal, his voice steady. He gave him a choice: surrender to the authorities by midnight or face the consequences. As he spoke, a shadow emerged beside him, a high-orc soldier, standing silently, awaiting orders. Jinwoo instructed the shadow to eliminate the thug if he failed to turn himself in. Yet, in a rare display of mercy, he added that he genuinely hoped the man would choose to live. However, he wasn't entirely sure if his shadow soldier had much patience. As he walked home, Jinwoo's mind shifted to the Jeju Island raid, which was set to begin the next day. Elsewhere, Goto Ryuji sat with his phone in hand, his fingers trembling. He couldn't shake the feeling that had haunted him ever since his battle with Jinwoo. During that fight, for the first time in his life, he had truly felt death looming over him. He had trained relentlessly, refined his skills, but no amount of preparation had erased the overwhelming presence he had encountered. Meanwhile, a helicopter carried elite hunters toward Jeju Island. The mission was about to begin. From the distance, Mount Halasan loomed, a silent witness to the battles that were about to unfold. At sea, an armada of ships moved into position. Fleets were deployed strategically, one near China's coast, another near Taiwan, and the largest force north of Jeju Island. This was a large-scale operation, one that would determine the fate of countless lives. On board one of the vessels, a hunter named Jung-soo stood with his team. He reminded them to stay alert as the ants could attack at any moment. Yoon-tae, one of the hunters, asked whether their strategy would actually work. Jung-soo admitted that there was no way to know for sure, but their job was to stand guard. If anything happened, they had to prevent the flying ants from reaching the mainland. Yoon-tae, confident in his leader, declared that he would follow Jung-soo to the ends of the earth. Around them, the rest of the guild members stood ready, waiting for their orders. Elsewhere in the Fame Guild, a hunter named Dong-woo was preparing to depart. He exchanged words with the vice guild master, who reminded him to stay safe. Although their role as the defense team meant they were on standby, she insisted that they remain prepared. Dong-wook, appreciating her leadership, thanked her for managing the guild so well. Though she downplayed her responsibilities, he knew that without her, their guild wouldn't be where it was today. As he bid farewell, she reminded him to return in one piece. Meanwhile, another conversation took place. A hunter named Taegu was angrily speaking on the phone, demanding that Min-sung, a high-value hunter, be moved to safety. He feared that the ants would attack sooner than expected, but the response on the other end was clear. The troops were already deployed and couldn't be recalled. Frustrated, Taegu could only tell them to stay safe and find cover. In another part of the operation, hunters from various guilds were being stationed at strategic points. Among them was the Fiend Guild, with Min-sung at the center of media attention. He saw this as an opportunity, knowing that being in the spotlight could boost his reputation. Defensive squads were positioned across the island, including elite A-rank hunters and their teams. The plan was clear. No matter what happened, they had to ensure that the mainland remained secure. As the mission officially began, all eyes were on Jeju Island, where the true battle was about to unfold. As the mission continued to unfold, preparations were in full swing. Among those assigned to the operation were members of the White Tiger Guild's elite strike squad, including experienced hunters like Park Hee-jin, Yoon Ki-jung, and Go Ming-hwan. In addition to active hunters, a number of retired ones had also chosen to participate in the mission, such as Lee Ju-hee and the seasoned veteran Mr. Song. There were even individuals who had awakened their abilities in the past, but had opted not to pursue a career as hunters. Now, with the nation facing a crisis, many of them had stepped forward. Out of the 50,000 awakened individuals in South Korea, nearly 5,000 had decided to join the battle, making up a significant portion of the defense force. Meanwhile, a separate group of South Korea's most powerful S-rank hunters was aboard a helicopter heading toward Mount Halasan. Among them was a man who introduced himself as a cameraman from a well-known news agency that specialized in covering hunter events. His role was to document the upcoming battle and broadcast the footage across the nation. However, he explained that the transmission would have a 10-minute delay, allowing editors to filter out anything deemed too sensitive or distressing for the public to see. The presence of a cameraman on such a dangerous mission raised some eyebrows among the hunters. One of them, Yoon Ho, expressed his surprise and wondered aloud about the reasoning behind this decision. The thought of a non-combatant being on the battlefield seemed reckless to him. However, Dong-wook, another S-rank hunter, remarked that a truly successful raid wasn't just about eliminating threats, it was also about ensuring that the people they protected had hope to hold on to. He acknowledged the risk but advised the cameraman to look after himself. The cameraman then reassured them that he wasn't completely defenseless. Despite working as a journalist, he was also an awakened individual with an A-rank license. In South Korea, many people with awakened abilities chose not to become professional hunters, instead opting for other career paths. The cameraman was one of those individuals, having previously covered dangerous events such as dungeon breaks. However, despite his past experience, he couldn't help but feel nervous about this particular mission. His hands trembled slightly as he held his equipment, revealing his unease. Noticing this, Dong-wook offered him a few reassuring words, suggesting that the Hunters Association must have confidence in their chances of success, otherwise they wouldn't have allowed a civilian to accompany them. The cameraman seemed to relax a little at this sentiment, thanking him for the encouragement. Yoon Ho, meanwhile, reflected on the significance of the upcoming battle. He recognized that this was the first time an S-rank raid would be broadcast to the public. It was also likely the last time something like this would happen. Previous attempts to reclaim Jeju Island had ended in disaster, and the anticipation surrounding this fourth attempt was at an all-time high. The people watching from home were hoping for a decisive victory. He understood the pressure of their expectations and silently acknowledged that if they failed again, it could spell catastrophe not just for South Korea, but for the entire region. Despite the weight of responsibility, Yoon-ho remained composed, reminding himself that the world needed heroes now more than ever. Elsewhere in the helicopter, Byung-gu, an experienced healer, engaged in a brief conversation with Yoon-ho. He explained that he had decided to join the raid out of concern for Yoon-ho's reckless tendencies. Over the years, he had noticed that whenever Yoon-ho spotted a dangerous monster, he would charge into battle without hesitation. Byung-gu worried that without a healer by his side, Yoon-ho might not make it out alive. Yoon-ho, clearly irritated by the remark, denied being that impulsive, though his teammates smirked knowingly at the friendly banter. Seated nearby, Hae-in seemed to be lost in thought. After a moment, she asked Yoon-ho if he had seen Jinwoo before departing for the mission. He shook his head, saying he hadn't. When he returned the question asking why she was curious, she hesitated for a brief moment before simply replying that it was nothing important. As the helicopter neared Jeju Island, the atmosphere grew more serious. The hunters could see the towering form of Mount Halasan in the distance, its dark silhouette standing ominously against the sky. The time for preparation was over. The battle was about to begin. Byung-gu, gripping his weapon tightly, felt his hands tremble. The island ahead of them had claimed the lives of countless hunters before. Now it was their turn to face the terror that awaited. The operation to reclaim Jeju Island had begun, and the atmosphere was tense. The Japanese S-rank hunters, led by their strongest members, moved cautiously through the ruins of Jeju City. Once a bustling metropolis, it had now become nothing more than a ghost town. Skyscrapers stood abandoned, their glass windows shattered, and the streets were filled with the eerie silence of a place long devoid of human life. As the hunters advanced, they noticed something unusual. Piles of ant corpses scattered along the roads. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that these ants hadn't been killed by humans. Instead, they had been cannibalized by their own kind. This unsettling discovery suggested that a stronger predator lurked within the ranks of the ant colony. The Japanese hunters wasted no time. Their leader called out through his communication device, signaling his team to begin their operation. As the call signs were confirmed one by one, the hunters released an overwhelming surge of mana, sending waves of energy rippling through the atmosphere. This immense burst of power served a single purpose: to lure the ants out of their nest and into battle. Above them, in a hovering helicopter, the South Korean SR rank hunters observed the situation unfold. The sheer intensity of the mana released by the Japanese team left them momentarily stunned. It was evident that the operation had officially begun. Their leader acknowledged that they had to move quickly. Every second wasted allowed the ants to regroup and strengthen their defenses. Deep within Mount Halasan, the massive crater that served as the heart of the ant colony, the response was immediate. From the dark tunnels, a swarm of ants emerged, their numbers growing rapidly as they rushed toward the surface. A portion of the swarm took to the skies, heading straight for the South Korean helicopter. Recognizing the imminent threat, one of the hunters stepped forward, preparing to intercept the oncoming creatures. With a wave of his hand, he conjured multiple spears of fire, launching them directly at the advancing ants. The flaming projectiles struck their targets with pinpoint accuracy, causing fiery explosions that lit up the sky. Despite the impressive display, the hunter remained composed, knowing that this was only the beginning. However, the attack revealed something concerning. The ants had evolved. Unlike their previous encounters, these creatures displayed an increased resistance to magic. Even the most powerful flames struggled to inflict significant damage. The realization set in that a much greater force would be required to deal with them effectively. Without hesitation, the hunter channeled a far greater amount of mana, summoning an enormous fireball that engulfed the sky. With a single motion, he unleashed it upon the enemy, engulfing them in a sea of flames. Though the attack succeeded in eliminating a large portion of the swarm, it was clear that the battle would not be easily won. As the helicopter continued its approach, one of the hunters made a sudden decision, leaping from the aircraft and descending toward the battlefield. His companions were momentarily taken aback by his reckless action, but they knew he was confident in his abilities. Landing amidst the swarm, he wasted no time in unleashing a fiery explosion that incinerated the surrounding ants. With a smirk, he compared the experience to burning ants with a magnifying glass as a child. But this time, instead of a small flame, he wielded the power of a living inferno. Recognizing that their ally had paved the way, the rest of the team prepared to join him. However, hesitation lingered in the air. Unlike previous attempts to reclaim Jeju Island, this time there were no planned escape routes. Once they entered the battlefield, they would either emerge victorious or perish within the tunnels of the ant nest. Nevertheless, they knew what was at stake. The leader of the South Korean team reminded them of their mission. They had only an hour before the Japanese hunters could no longer hold back the main swarm. Within that time, they had to locate and eliminate the queen. Without further discussion, the team steeled themselves and leaped from the helicopter, diving headfirst into battle. Meanwhile, offshore, another part of the operation was being executed. A massive warship equipped with advanced technology had been stationed to support the hunters. On board, a high-ranking official of the Japanese Blade Guild issued orders to activate specialized jamming signals. The purpose of this technology was simple. By disrupting the queen's ability to communicate with her army, they could weaken the ants' coordination. As soon as the signals were activated, the effect was immediate. The ants, which had previously moved with synchronized precision, suddenly displayed signs of confusion. Without their queen's guidance, their movements became more erratic, providing a crucial advantage to the hunters. Back on the island, various teams engaged in combat. In one section of the battlefield, a group of Japanese hunters fought relentlessly, slashing through wave after wave of ants. Among them, a young but skilled swordsman found himself momentarily overwhelmed before a senior hunter intervened, cutting down an approaching enemy and warning him to stay focused. Another pair of hunters debated whether it would be more efficient to eliminate the ants outright, rather than waiting for the South Koreans to complete their mission. Their conversation was interrupted when one of their allies, known for his unconventional fighting style, gleefully tore the wings off his enemies one by one, treating the battle like a game. Elsewhere, another hunter observed the battle from higher ground. Noticing bursts of fire erupting near the tunnels, he speculated that the South Korean fire mage was responsible. He mused about what might happen if fire and ice were to clash in battle. Beside him, a vast number of ants lay frozen, a testament to his own formidable abilities. Within the ant tunnels, the South Korean team made their way through the labyrinth-like passageways. They acknowledged that the once beautiful Mount Halasan had been reduced to nothing more than a massive ant colony. One of their members took the lead, creating a barrier of flames at the entrance to prevent lower-ranking ants from interfering. With the path secured, he focused on using his fire to map out the tunnel. By casting fireballs into various pathways, he could determine which ones led deeper inside based on how the flames traveled. Finally, he identified the correct path, one that showed no signs of obstruction. With newfound confidence, he signaled his team to proceed. Meanwhile, far away from the battlefield, a young man was training in a quiet park. His system displayed his current stats, showing immense growth in his strength, agility, and intelligence. After completing his run, he noticed that the usually lively park was now deserted. It didn't take long for him to realize why. Most people were likely glued to their screens, watching the Jeju Island raid unfold. Though he acknowledged the power of those participating, he couldn't shake the feeling that things might not go as planned. For now, he continued his training, knowing that if the situation demanded it, he would soon be called upon to act. The South Korean hunters continued their advance through the dark tunnels, moving cautiously as they eliminated any remaining ants. A well-placed arrow from Taegyu struck one of the creatures, confirming that only a few remained in the area. The lack of resistance indicated that their earlier assumptions were correct. The majority of the ants had already vacated the tunnels. Taegu studied the creatures, noting that they were unlike anything he had encountered before. Their eyes appeared dull and deteriorated, suggesting that they had adapted to their underground environment. If their vision had weakened, it likely meant they had developed other heightened senses, making them even more dangerous as guards of the deeper tunnels. However, if these were not the Queen's elite protectors, then their mission would be much easier. With their overwhelming firepower, breaking through would not be a challenge. Meanwhile, Byung-gu voiced his unease. He speculated on the Queen's whereabouts, wondering if she had abandoned her colony and fled. However, Young-ho dismissed the idea immediately. The island was completely isolated, and there was no conceivable escape route for the Queen. She had no choice but to remain, which meant they would find her soon. A cameraman accompanied them, carefully adjusting his equipment to capture the dimly lit tunnels. Though the lack of light made filming difficult, he reassured himself that the editing team would enhance the footage later. As they pressed forward, Zhang Yin ignited a small fireball in his palm to illuminate their surroundings. The flickering flames revealed something that made him stop in his tracks: an enormous chamber filled with ant eggs. This was the spawning ground. If the Queen was anywhere nearby, it would be here. He quickly deduced that the ants they had encountered earlier were likely stationed to protect the eggs. Without hesitation, he prepared to incinerate them all. However, Hae-in intervened, noticing something unusual. Among the hundreds of eggs, one stood out, far larger than the rest, and already hatched. Byung-gu's face twisted in horror as he stared at the remains of the broken shell. The sheer size of it sent a chill down his spine. He could only imagine what kind of monstrous creature had emerged from within. Perhaps it was one of the Queen's royal guards. Before he could voice his thoughts, Yoon-ho placed a firm hand on his shoulder, reminding him of their priority, the Queen herself. Everything else was secondary. Despite Yoon-ho's words, an air of unease lingered. The sight of that massive egg had left a deep impression on them all. They couldn't shake the feeling that something far more dangerous than ordinary ants awaited them in the depths of the tunnels. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the Japanese Charlie team was engaged in combat. Shimizu, Fujishima, and Kenzo had been holding their ground, fending off waves of flying ants. Kenzo, now covered in blood, had managed to take down 30 of them, but not without sustaining injuries. His shoulder and waist bore deep wounds from their coordinated attacks. Despite his injuries, he remained alert, gripping the severed head of an ant in one hand. Shim Yuzu, ever the opportunist, teased him about the situation. She offered to heal him, but hinted that there would be a cost. Kenzo rolled his eyes, already anticipating her antics. She always had an ulterior motive, and he knew she wasn't talking about money. With an exasperated sigh, he told her to stop playing around and get on with it. Their banter was abruptly cut short. Just as Shimizu turned to face the approaching enemies, a blur of movement flashed across the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, her head was severed from her body, hitting the ground before she even realized what had happened. Kenzo froze, his mind struggling to process the sudden loss. Fujishima, standing nearby, was equally stunned. Their teammate, someone who had been joking just moments ago, had been slain in an instant. Before Kenzo could react further, a new threat emerged. A towering ant with glowing red eyes charged at him, moving at an inhuman speed. His instincts kicked in and he braced himself, ready to strike. His injuries no longer mattered. He had no time to hesitate. With their team caught off guard and an unknown enemy now upon them, the battle had taken a deadly turn. As the intense battle unfolded, Kenzo moved in to strike, but the enormous ant crushed his head in an instant. His lifeless body collapsed, and before anyone could react, Fujishima met the same fate. His head was severed before he could even complete his attack, his sword falling uselessly to the ground. The powerful ant had taken down 3 highly skilled Japanese hunters, effortlessly. Meanwhile, deeper inside the tunnel, Dong-wook faced off against another massive ant. Observing its size and power, he suspected it might be a royal guard protecting the queen. Unlike ordinary ants, these creatures displayed remarkable strength, comparable to elite hunters. However, he reminded himself that despite their abilities, they remained instinct-driven beasts. The ant lunged at him, ramming into his shield with incredible force. Dong-wook braced himself, analyzing its attack pattern. Unlike human fighters, the ant lacked varied combat tactics, making its movements more predictable. Just as he was about to counter, Hyene launched herself into the air, her sword aimed directly at the ant's head. With precise timing, she drove her blade through its skull and, using her momentum, sliced through its entire body upon landing. As the first ant fell, another rushed toward her. Without hesitation, she swung her weapon and cleanly severed its head. She noted that their bodies were tougher than she had expected, requiring precise, well-placed strikes to eliminate them quickly. Dong-wook acknowledged that these royal guards were unlike the common ants they had encountered before, but he was relieved that their numbers were relatively low. Meanwhile, Byung-guk reassured the team that they had nothing to fear, with him providing support. Yun-ho, hearing this, teased him about how much he had changed, no longer acting like the cautious warrior he once was. Byung-gu smirked and told Yun-ho to focus, demonstrating his skills by crushing an ant with his weapon. He warned everyone that even if they destroyed an ant's skull, it could survive for a while. The best strategy, he explained, was to sever their limbs or ensure a fatal blow. Yun-ho nodded, keeping the advice in mind as they pressed forward. He realized that although the queen herself was missing, her royal guards were present. Their appearance and behavior suggested they were an older generation of ants, possibly outcasts from a previous cycle. This led him to suspect that new, stronger royal guards might be waiting for them deeper inside the tunnels. Byung-gu then activated a powerful spell from his book. A mystical energy radiated from its pages, engulfing the team in a glowing aura. Each hunter felt an incredible surge of power coursing through them, their abilities enhanced beyond their normal limits. Zhang Yan noted that this wasn't just a simple buff. It was as if their full potential had been unlocked. Feeling the newfound strength, Yun-ho suggested they each take on 10 ants, while the cameraman, despite his A-rank combat skills, volunteered to handle any remaining threats. Confident in their boosted abilities, Yun-ho eagerly anticipated the fight ahead. Meanwhile, in another part of the battlefield, Team D Delta, led by Kei and Izawa, rushed toward Team Charlie's last known location after losing contact with them. Izawa voiced his frustration, wondering what had happened to their allies. Kei urged him to slow down, reminding him to stay cautious. Upon arrival, they saw countless ant corpses scattered across the ground, evidence of a fierce battle. At first, Izawa assumed Team Charlie had emerged victorious, but a sinking feeling crept into his chest. Something wasn't right. As they scanned the area, Izawa's eyes landed on a pair of glasses lying in the dirt. A wave of dread washed over him as he recognized them. His gaze drifted forward, and what he saw next made his stomach drop. His voice trembled as he muttered in disbelief, unable to accept the sight before him. Kei, following his line of sight, suddenly removed his mask and vomited violently. Izawa, confused, asked what was wrong. Gasping for breath, Kei managed to explain. The air was thick with a nauseating stench, unlike anything he had ever encountered. Realizing the source of the smell, Kei's eyes widened in pure horror. His body tensed and panic set in. In a desperate reaction, he unleashed a powerful burst of ice magic, forming a massive barrier that exploded outward, knocking down several trees. The true horror of what had happened to Team Charlie was finally coming into view. Behind the thick barrier of ice, Kei's eyes are filled with fear as he senses the overwhelming presence of his enemy. The force behind the opponent's strike is immense, and within moments, cracks spread across the ice shield, threatening to shatter it completely. Kei remains inside, trapped and vulnerable. Meanwhile, deep inside the tunnels, the South Korean hunters successfully eliminate the wave of attacking ants. Despite their victory, one of them expresses frustration over the amount of time spent battling these creatures. However, another reassures him, pointing out that the fight lasted only 5 minutes, which is an impressive feat considering the number of ants they faced. Among them, Yun-ho silently assesses the situation. His thoughts linger on Hyene, who seems to be moving with newfound agility and strength. The enhancements she received earlier appear to have taken full effect, allowing her to eliminate far more enemies than him in such a short span of time. As the group pushes forward, they track their remaining time. Only 30 minutes remain before they must regroup. Dongwoo grows increasingly concerned, knowing that they must complete their objective before time runs out. At that moment, Hae-in suddenly stops, her senses sharpening. A distinct scent reaches her, and she immediately recognizes it. It belongs to the queen. Additionally, she detects the presence of powerful royal guards stationed nearby. Yunho narrows his eyes, peering into the darkness ahead. His enhanced vision allows him to see through the shadows, and his instincts confirm what Hae-in suspected. At the farthest end of the tunnel, the queen waits, surrounded by 8 of her strongest guards. Dongwoo quickly glances at Hae-in, silently asking if she is prepared for the upcoming battle. She nods in response, fully ready to face them. A sudden explosion of flames erupts as Zhang Yan summons a massive fire dragon, its blazing eyes glowing with intense energy. Normally, he would hold back his strength, but this time, he unleashes his full power without hesitation. Just as an ant attempts to strike him from behind, a flurry of arrows pierces through its body, fired with expert precision. At the same time, Yunho undergoes a transformation. His armor begins to crack, and his entire presence shifts into something more beast-like. A bright white aura surrounds him, radiating raw power. Without hesitation, he lunges forward, tearing through 2 ants with nothing but his bare hands. His claws rip through their bodies effortlessly, demonstrating the overwhelming strength of his altered form. Pain watches in astonishment, realizing that this is Yunho's true beast form. His appearance is monstrous, but his destructive power is undeniable. As the battlefield is filled with the roars of the transformed hunter, the intensity of the battle only continues to rise. Meanwhile, Dongwook manages to reach the royal guards and sets Hae-in up for battle, allowing her to engage them head-on. With precise movements, she drives her sword into the ground, activating a powerful skill that sends shockwaves through the area. The attack forces the guards into action, drawing their attention entirely to her. Seizing the opportunity, Dongwook rushes past them, heading straight for the queen. His mind is set on one goal, keeping her contained until the guards are dealt with. Armed with his shield and spear, Dongwook stands before the queen, bracing for the inevitable confrontation. He knows that she is the key to ending this battle. Elsewhere, a cameraman closely observes the action, aware of the massive audience watching the live broadcast. Reports indicate that viewership has skyrocketed, exceeding expectations. As he tries to capture a better angle, a sudden force pulls him back. Turning around, he finds himself face to face with Byung-gu, who warns him about the dangers of being in such a high-level dungeon. Byung-gu reminds him that no one is responsible for his safety, emphasizing that this battlefield is no place for someone unprepared. A green aura begins to surround Byung-gu, its presence radiating power. The cameraman watches in disbelief. He had always heard that healers were weak in combat, but witnessing Byung-gu's presence firsthand, he realizes how wrong that assumption was. Compared to him, even an A-rank hunter seems insignificant. Far from the battlefield, in a small house in South Korea, an elderly woman watches the live coverage of the raid on television. She calls out to her husband, urging him to watch with her. However, he remains uninterested, dismissing the event entirely. She insists that they should pay attention since this raid could mark the end of the ant threat once and for all. The husband scoffs, claiming that the hunters are always full of empty promises, and he refuses to waste his time. His wife, however, remains firm, reminding him of the pain they endured. She speaks with unwavering determination, emphasizing that those hunters are avenging someone important to them. Although the details remain unclear, the way she speaks suggests that they may have lost a child in a previous raid. If true, they could be the parents of a fallen hunter, someone who perished alongside Yunho and Byung-gu during an earlier mission. As the wife continues watching, she mutters under her breath, expressing her frustration at her husband's stubbornness. He remains focused on his newspaper, but she refuses to let go of the hope that this battle will bring long-awaited justice. The television broadcast delivers breaking news about the ongoing battle deep within the underground tunnels. South Korean hunters have reached the Queen Ant's chamber, standing face to face with the largest ant ever discovered. The report highlights Ma Dongwook's efforts, revealing that he is holding off the queen alone, but the situation is dire. He needs support. However, the other hunters are still engaged in combat, struggling to eliminate the remaining royal guards before they can join the final confrontation. Across the country, people are glued to their screens, anxiously following the raid. Suddenly, cheers erupt from various neighborhoods as the news announces that one of the powerful guards has been taken down by Yunho. Even though the atmosphere is tense, excitement builds among the spectators. In a quiet home, an elderly woman watches the broadcast, feeling both nervous and hopeful as she notices how the people around her are cheering. Meanwhile, across different locations, groups of people remain focused on the live coverage. A restaurant full of customers watches intently, eyes fixed on a phone streaming the battle. A young couple leans in closer when they hear that only 3 guards remain. At the same time, a large digital billboard in a busy district displays updated statistics. Only 2 royal guards stand in the way of the hunters reaching the queen. The entire country seems to hold its breath as the news anchors declare that victory is within reach. Back at the elderly couple's house, the husband, who had previously shown little interest, suddenly reacts when he hears that the hunters are close to winning. For the first time, he moves toward the television, his expression shifting. His wife looks at him in surprise. The tension in the room mirrors that of the battlefield. Then, a crucial update arrives. The last royal guard has been defeated. There is no longer anything protecting the queen. The elderly man, eyes filled with emotion, speaks up, recalling that this is the 4th attempt to clear this dangerous raid. Unlike before, he dares to hope that this time will be different. His wife silently acknowledges the pain they carry, yet she too clings to the possibility of victory. At the broadcasting station, the viewership has skyrocketed, surpassing 85%, a new national record. South Korea is on the verge of achieving something historic. If the hunters succeed, the country will join the ranks of the most powerful nations in the world, those that have cleared an S-rank gate. So far, only 4 nations hold that distinction: the United States, China, Russia, and France. The entire country waits to see if South Korea will be next. Deep inside the cavernous tunnels, the elite hunters prepare for the final confrontation. Ma Dong-wook gives a clear command for the team to close in on the queen. Without hesitation, Lin Tae-ju raises his bow, firing a relentless barrage of arrows straight at the monstrous creature's head. Yunho, unshaken by fear, charges in, his claws slashing deep into the queen's leg. He remains firm in his belief that a queen without her royal guards is nothing more than a powerless figurehead. However, just as it seems they have the upper hand, the queen's eyes flash with an eerie glow. In an instant, she unleashes a devastating counterattack. An acidic, corrosive liquid sprays from her mouth, heading straight for Dong-wook and Yunho. But before the damage can take effect, Byung-gu intervenes, casting a powerful healing spell. The acid sizzles on impact, but the 2 hunters emerge unscathed. Byung-gu smirks, remarking that he should have been the true target of the queen's attack. Recognizing the threat he poses, the queen suddenly lunges toward Byung-gu. However, Dong-wook swiftly blocks her path, planting his shield firmly into the ground. He refuses to let their healer become a casualty. Just as the intense battle rages on, Zhang-en raises his hands and calls upon a destructive spell. A fierce blaze erupts, engulfing the queen in flames. The scorching fire crackles and roars, illuminating the battlefield in an eerie glow. Sensing an opportunity, Zhang-en releases an even stronger burst of fire, resulting in a massive explosion that shakes the chamber. As the smoke begins to clear, Yunho observes the queen carefully. Years of experience have taught him how to read an opponent's condition, and from what he sees, she is on the brink of death. Victory is within reach. The battle should be over soon. However, before anyone can celebrate, a terrifying sound fills the cavern. The queen lets out a deafening, bone-rattling roar, a deep, guttural cry that seems to shake the very foundations of the underground tunnels. The force of the sound wave ripples through the air, making Yunho uneasy. He expected a death cry, but something about this feels different. A dreadful realization dawns upon him. This isn't a simple scream of defeat. She's calling for something. Elsewhere, inside a military base, Sugimoto frantically reports to his superior, Gotoruji. His voice is filled with shock and urgency. The ant army, which had been held back, is suddenly retreating toward the tunnels. At the same time, the jamming signals that had been preventing enemy communication have ceased to function. Gotoruji, taken aback, struggles to process what's happening. This wasn't part of the plan. The balance of the battle is shifting in an unexpected direction. Back inside the queen's chamber, Hae-in steps forward to land the finishing blow. With a swift, precise movement, her blade slices cleanly through the queen's neck. The massive creature collapses, lifeless. The hunters pause for a moment, staring at the fallen queen. It's finally over, or so they think. Daegu confirms their success, proudly announcing that South Korea has now become the 7th country in history to clear an S-rank gate. Relief washes over the hunters, but Yoon-ho remains frozen in place, his instincts warning him that something is off. His unease proves justified when Dong-wook suddenly alerts the team something is wrong. Reports flood in confirming that a massive swarm of ants is now rushing toward their location. They need to evacuate immediately. Shock spreads among the hunters. Hae-in is in disbelief, questioning how the Japanese rank hunters failed to hold the line for even an hour. Daegu, equally puzzled, wonders if something far worse is happening outside their knowledge. Dong-wook, trying to make sense of the situation, reveals that the Hunters Association is still analyzing the sudden shift. However, before they can fully process the information, something terrifying happens. Jang-in, who had previously set up a massive fire barrier at the tunnel entrance, suddenly realizes that it has been completely destroyed. A sense of dread overtakes him as he turns to face the source of the disturbance. Emerging from the darkness is a creature unlike any they have faced before. The overwhelming presence makes it nearly impossible to move. Yoon-ho, staring in shock, tries to comprehend what he is seeing. The figure that steps forward is not just another ant. It is something far greater. Its body is shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing a sinister shade of red. Then, without warning, the creature unleashes an ear-piercing roar, one so powerful that the very air trembles. The sheer force of the sound wave spreads across the battlefield, felt by every living being on the island. A cold chill runs down Yoon-ho's spine. His instincts scream at him that this creature is unlike anything they have encountered before. His mind races with a single thought: how can something this powerful exist? As the hunters stood amidst the dark tunnels, a heavy and ominous aura filled the air. The oppressive energy was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Hyeon collapsed to her knees, her breath shaky as she covered her nose. The darkness emanating from the monstrous ant before them was suffocating, pressing down on her chest like an invisible weight. Her hands trembled as she struggled to comprehend the sheer magnitude of its power. Fear gripped her heart, her instincts screaming that the creature before them was no ordinary beast. The sound of its footsteps alone sent chills down the spines of everyone present. Each step carried an eerie stillness, an unsettling rhythm that filled the cavern with dread. Dong-wook, recognizing the urgency of the situation, braced himself. There was no time for hesitation. This creature needed to be taken down before it became an even greater threat. As the massive ant moved forward, it did not attack immediately. Instead, it walked past Dong-wook, seemingly ignoring him. Yet, as it drew closer, an unbearable sense of terror washed over him. His body tensed, his muscles frozen, as if the very air around him had turned into an invisible force crushing his bones. The pressure alone was enough to make even the strongest hunter falter. The ant came to a halt before the lifeless body of the queen, its dark, beady eyes fixated on her still form as if assessing what had occurred. A deep silence followed, thick with tension. Then, without warning, the creature opened its massive claws and unleashed an ear-splitting roar. The sheer force of its cry shook the cavern walls, sending waves of energy rippling through the air. The hunters, caught in its wake, dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of its power. A crimson aura began to swirl around the ant, thick and malevolent. Its presence alone was suffocating. It turned its gaze toward Hae-in, who barely had the strength to keep herself upright. Her body trembled under the crushing weight of the creature's killing intent. Before she could react, the ant disappeared from sight, only to reappear behind her in an instant. Her eyes widened in shock. A powerful strike landed on her side before she could even think of dodging. The impact was devastating. A choked gasp escaped her lips as blood splattered from her mouth. Her body was sent flying across the chamber, crashing violently into the stone wall. The impact left deep cracks in the tunnel as she collapsed onto the ground, barely conscious. Dong-wook's eyes widened in horror as he watched Haeyeon fall. He shouted her name, his voice raw with desperation. But before he could move, the ant was already in front of him. A single punch shattered his shield into pieces, the force sending shockwaves through his body. Refusing to be defeated so easily, Dong-wook retaliated with a strike from his sword. Yet, the ant effortlessly caught the blade in its claws. In one swift motion, it sliced through his arm, severing it completely. A spray of blood filled the air as Dong-wook staggered back, gasping in pain. Before anyone could recover, the ant turned its attention to Yunho. With a blur of movement, its claws slashed through him, leaving deep wounds that rendered him motionless. Zhang Yin, who had been preparing a spell, barely had time to react before the ant's claws slashed across his torso, cutting him down instantly. From a distance, Taegyu, seeing an opening, pulled back his bowstring and launched a flurry of magic-infused arrows toward the beast. His confidence surged. He wouldn't miss this time, but his hope was short-lived. The ant casually lifted its claw and caught the arrow mid-flight. The hunters watched in shock as it effortlessly crushed the projectile into dust. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was upon Taegyu. A single crushing punch sent him hurtling across the battlefield, his body slamming into the rocky ground. Dong-woo, still reeling from his previous injury, managed to launch an attack, striking the ant and forcing it to momentarily retreat. Dong-wook, breathing heavily, gritted his teeth as he steadied himself. His severed arm should have rendered him useless, but something had changed. His wounds were gone. Dong-wook, their healer, had been working in the shadows, using his abilities to restore their strength. Dong-gu utilized a unique skill called Disguise, a defensive ability that rendered him nearly undetectable by masking his presence. Though the technique had a drawback preventing him from moving, it allowed him to heal without drawing attention to himself. He remained hidden, knowing that as long as he was there, they had a fighting chance. However, the ant's piercing gaze suddenly shifted, scanning the battlefield. Though no one had revealed Byung-gu's location, a sickening realization dawned upon him. The creature knew. A dreadful chill ran through him as he tried to calm his mind. His skill was still active. The ant shouldn't have been able to sense him. Then, Yunho, filled with desperation, screamed Byung-gu's name. In that instant, the truth became clear. The ant had already located him. A sharp pain erupted through Byung-gu's back. He barely had time to react before the ant's claw impaled him, piercing clean through his body. His grip on his book slackened as blood dripped onto its pages. His breathing grew ragged, his vision blurring as the life drained from his body. Yunho could only watch in helpless horror as Byung-gu staggered. The healer's lips moved, forming a single desperate word: run. Before Yunho could react, the unthinkable happened. The monstrous ant lifted Byung-gu's body, its mandibles opening wide. In a gruesome instant, it bit down, severing his head from his body. Blood splattered across the cavern floor, and the hunters watched in absolute terror. A rage unlike anything Yunho had ever felt surged within him. He launched himself at the ant, but his attack was stopped effortlessly. The creature grabbed him by the throat, lifting him into the air as if he weighed nothing. As Yunho struggled against its grip, gasping for breath, a voice echoed in his mind. Run. Yunho's vision blurred as he struggled to stay conscious, his body aching from the brutal fight. In his mind, Byung-gu's voice echoed again, repeating the same desperate warning. His heart pounded with frustration and sorrow, but before he could process the loss, the monstrous ant standing before him spoke. Its deep, unsettling voice filled the space, its words dripping with confidence. The creature declared that the hunters were weak, nothing more than insignificant obstacles in its path. It acknowledged that their queen had been slain, but made it clear that simply defeating her and her soldiers wasn't enough. The beast's words carried an eerie calmness, as though it had already decided the fate of everyone standing before it. As it spoke, Yunho's mind was flooded with memories of Byung-gu, his kindness, his determination, and his final moments. The realization hit him like a crushing weight. The ant hadn't just killed Byung-gu, it had consumed him. This creature had the terrifying ability to absorb the power and life force of those it devoured. Every fallen hunter made it stronger. Then, without warning, the ant shifted its focus and asked a strange question. Who was their king? Yoon-ho, still dangling in its iron grip, was too weak to answer. His mind raced, trying to understand what it meant. Before he could make sense of the question, the ant continued, stating that Haean had already been defeated and that Jang-in had been gravely injured. Nearby, the cameraman, paralyzed with fear, struggled to remain on his feet. The entire battlefield was a scene of devastation, and the remaining hunters barely clung to life. Just as the horror of their situation settled in, the ant suddenly paused, its body tensed, its head snapping toward the tunnel's exit. Something had caught its attention. A powerful presence was approaching from the outside, a force so strong that even the ant couldn't ignore it. Without hesitation, the creature released Yoon-ho from its grasp and shot toward the tunnel's exit at incredible speed. Yoon-ho crashed to the ground, his lungs burning as he gasped for breath. Every fiber of his being screamed in pain, but he forced himself to focus. He could still feel the lingering energy of the approaching force. The only explanation was that Goto Ryuji had arrived. Yoon-ho knew they had no time to recover. If they stayed, the ant would return and they wouldn't survive another encounter. His thoughts were interrupted by a new horror. An army of ants swarming toward them, their dark forms filling the tunnels. Meanwhile, outside the tunnel, Goto Ryuji moved swiftly with Ishida and Hashino. They were heading toward the last known location of their missing team members. As they moved, Ishida voiced his concern. Something was wrong. They had lost contact with Team Charlie, and now Team Delta had gone silent as well. Ryuji remained calm, suggesting it might be a communication issue, but the unease in his voice was evident. They should have been within range. To confirm, Ryuji reached out to Team Bravo. A crackling voice came through the communication device. Tawada responded, reporting that Team Bravo was still active and in good condition. However, they too had lost contact with the other teams, with the only stable communication being from Team Alpha. Tawada asked if they should check on the missing teams, but Ryuji declined. He and his group were already on their way to investigate. The situation was growing more dire with each passing moment. Suddenly, Ryuji received another call. The voice on the other end was familiar. It was Matsumoto. Ryuji immediately recognized the man, and their conversation hinted at a greater concern unfolding behind the scenes. Meanwhile, far away on a ship near the coast of China, a quiet conversation took place between the captain and one of his crew members. The crewman commented on the South Korean raid, calling it a bold move. He then scoffed at the idea that the ants would travel all the way to China, dismissing it as an overblown worry. The captain, however, wasn't so sure. He remarked that Japan was offering an unusual level of support to South Korea. This wasn't just an ordinary raid. Goto Ryuji had something to prove. If he wanted to become a national hunter, he needed to clear an S-rank gate, just like the other legends before him. The crew member nodded in agreement. Despite Ryuji's impressive skills, he had never successfully led a mission of this scale. The captain, deep in thought, muttered to himself about how convenient the situation was. When the crew member pressed him to explain, he simply smirked and brushed it off. Then, putting on his cap, he made a grim prediction. This raid would mark a turning point. One of the two nations, either Japan or South Korea, would face disaster before it was over. Back in the battlefield, Team Alpha finally reached the last known location of Team Delta and Team Charlie. The sight before them was more horrifying than they could have imagined. The ground was littered with lifeless bodies. Every single one of their fellow Japanese hunters had been slaughtered. There were no survivors. The scene shifts to a television broadcast station, where tension fills the air. The head of the station sits frozen in his chair, eyes locked on the screen in front of him. His face is pale, his fingers trembling slightly as he watches the horrifying events unfold. Just moments ago, a single monstrous ant had single-handedly decimated a group of elite hunters. The sheer brutality of it left him speechless. How could something like this even be possible? Around him, the newsroom is in chaos. Phones ring non-stop as viewers flood the station with frantic calls. One of the staff members turns to the head, voice urgent, reporting that they're on the verge of a complete system crash due to the overwhelming influx of calls. The head barely reacts, staring blankly at the screen. He mutters under his breath, lamenting that they had no choice but to cut the broadcast earlier. Did people really expect them to air footage of hunters being torn apart in real time? Just when he thinks the worst has come to pass, another staff member suddenly exclaims that someone has appeared at the battlefield. The head turns sharply, barely comprehending the words. He demands clarification, but before the staff member can explain, he sees it for himself. His breath catches in his throat. On the screen, a lone figure stands amidst the chaos. His aura is unlike anything they've seen before. The head quickly regains his composure and barks an order to resume the live broadcast immediately. A staff member hesitates, warning that without a delay, they won't be able to cut the feed if things take another disastrous turn. But the head refuses to listen. They've already taken the broadcast down once. They can't afford to do it again. It's all or nothing now. Back at the battlefield, Jinwoo arrives through the tunnel, his presence overwhelming. His shadow soldiers, including his strongest generals, materialize beside him, each radiating an intense aura of power. Without hesitation, Jinwoo commands Iron to draw the attention of the enemy forces. In response, Iron unleashes a deep, resonating roar, activating his unique skill that provokes all nearby enemies. As the enraged ants swarm toward them, Jinwoo watches in approval. The battle has begun. Wielding his twin daggers, weapons he had obtained from a past battle, Jinwoo moves at lightning speed, cutting down countless ants in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, his shadow soldiers spread out, each engaging in combat with remarkable efficiency. Tusk raises a magical barrier, shielding the injured hunters from further harm. Among them, one of the wounded hunters watches in shock, struggling to comprehend what's happening. He asks who is fighting the ants, and another hunter reassures him, stating that for the first time, they might actually have a chance to survive. In another corner of the battlefield, Igris makes his presence known. Without even drawing his sword, he crushes an approaching ant with his bare hands before slamming another into the ground. More ants attempt to ambush him, but with a single fluid motion, he cuts them down. Tank joins the fray, lunging at his enemies with unrelenting ferocity, while Iron follows suit, swinging his massive blade with devastating force. As Jinwoo surveys the battlefield, he realizes that they are steadily gaining the upper hand, but he's not done yet. With a single word, he activates his necromantic skill, commanding the fallen ants to rise again as his shadows. The dead creatures slowly stand back up, their glowing eyes now reflecting their new allegiance. The hunters who had been watching in horror moments ago now stare in stunned silence. The battle has completely changed in an instant. Inside the television station, the staff scrambles for answers. The broadcast is live, and every viewer in the nation is witnessing the impossible. The cameraman, still on site, is bombarded with questions from the studio, but all he can manage to say is that he has no idea what's happening. The only thing that is clear is that the tide of battle has shifted dramatically. Jinwoo moves toward the injured S-rank hunters, pulling out a bottle filled with a mysterious liquid. He instructs them to drink it, knowing it will aid in their recovery. As the potion takes effect, the hunters feel their strength returning, their wounds closing at an unnatural speed. One of them notices that a female hunter remains unconscious despite the potion's effects. Jinwoo explains that her injuries are far too severe for simple healing magic. He glances at her briefly, sensing her weakening condition, before turning his attention back to the battlefield. Just as he prepares to move again, his senses sharpen. A presence unlike any other lingers nearby. He immediately knows who it is, the monstrous ant that had single-handedly wiped out the S-rank hunters before his arrival. A sinister aura surrounds the creature as it slowly approaches, its glowing eyes filled with an eerie intelligence. The beast's gaze locks onto Jinwoo, and it finally speaks, questioning his identity and the whereabouts of a king. The remaining hunters, still recovering, recognize the creature immediately. One of them whispers in horror, realizing that the strongest among them had already fallen to this monstrous being. Jinwoo, however, remains calm, his mind processing the situation. The reason he had been unable to sense Goto Ryuji's shadow earlier suddenly becomes clear. This ant was responsible for his death. A powerful tension fills the air as the two figures stand opposite each other. The sheer force of their auras collides, creating an intense pressure that weighs heavily on those around them. The ant stares at Jinwoo, sensing something different about him. It acknowledges his strength, noting his formidable presence, before unleashing a roar that shakes the entire battlefield. The ground trembles under its power, but Jinwoo remains unfazed. He watches the creature closely, a confident smirk forming on his lips. If the ant wants to test him, he'll gladly show it the difference in their strength. Meanwhile, in Seoul, rain pours heavily over the city. A cell phone screen flickers as messages flood in, all reporting the same thing. The broadcast of the raid has been interrupted. But the events unfolding at the battlefield are far from over. The true battle is just about to begin. Across different locations, hunters and officials watch the unfolding battle with growing concern. Juhee and Mr. Song exchange uneasy glances, both struggling to understand the situation. Mr. Song wonders about the fate of the other hunters trapped inside the tunnels, while Juhee is still processing the terrifying presence of the giant ant she saw earlier. Meanwhile, hunters Yongsoo and Yoontae are in complete shock. The abrupt cutoff of the broadcast leaves them staring at the screen in disbelief, unable to comprehend what just happened. Soon after, a grim announcement confirms the tragic death of Hunter Min Bung-gu. The atmosphere grows heavier as the report continues, revealing that several other hunters remain trapped underground with no way to escape. On the main island, Hunter Min Seong listens in stunned silence, unable to believe the dire turn of events. Elsewhere, members of the White Tiger Guild, along with the Vice Guild Master of the Fame Guild, watch the broadcast with worried expressions. Then, something unexpected happens. A new development emerges. A mysterious individual has suddenly appeared at the battlefield. The live feed resumes, showing the unknown figure, and the White Tiger Guild members can only stare in shock. None of them can believe what they are witnessing. In Japan, a man sits in deep thought, replaying his last conversation with Goto Ryuji. The memory is vivid. Ryuji had encountered a monstrous ant and noted its menacing aura. During their exchange, the creature questioned him, asking if he was a king. With his usual confidence, Ryuji had responded affirmatively. Now, that conversation is all that remains. The man listening is Matsumoto Shigeo, the chairman of the Japanese Hunters Association. Holding his cigarette between his fingers, he bites down on it, unable to hide his unease. Sugimoto, standing nearby with his back turned, monitors a radar screen. He calmly informs Matsumoto that the powerful ant has returned to the Queen's chamber. Matsumoto quickly asks whether the South Korean team is still alive. Sugimoto confirms that surprisingly they are, and also notes an unusual reading. There is another significant mana presence detected. Matsumoto immediately orders the television to be turned on, eager to see the live broadcast from South Korea for him. Meanwhile, at Jinwoo's house, his younger sister Jinna hears an unusual sound. A sharp crack echoes through the room, and she turns to her mother in confusion. Her mother sighs and apologizes, explaining that the television suddenly stopped working. She then asks about Jinwoo, wondering why he hasn't returned yet, as he had said he wouldn't be gone for long. Jinna's expression shifts as she suddenly hurries back to her room. Her mother watches her leave and shakes her head, muttering to herself about how both of her children have been acting strangely today. Once inside, Jinna immediately grabs her phone and, upon seeing what's on the screen, her eyes widen in shock. At the same time, Chairman Go Gun-hee, the leader of the Korean Hunters Association, is watching the broadcast with such intense excitement that he accidentally snaps the armrest of his chair. His grip tightens as he leans forward, overwhelmed by what he sees. The name leaves his lips in awe. Sung Jinwoo. A doctor standing beside him cautions him to remain calm, but the chairman barely hears the warning, too focused on the scene unfolding before him. Back on the battlefield, deep within the tunnels, the tension is unbearable. Jinwoo and the monstrous ant warriors stand face to face, locked in a silent standoff. The air between them crackles with energy, a clash of overwhelming pressure. Then, in an instant, the ant lunges forward and throws a devastating punch straight at Jinwoo's face. the sheer force of the ground beneath them sending a powerful shockwave through the cavern. Massive chunks of rock explode into the air, and debris scatters across the battlefield. From a distance, Jang In and Baek Yoon-ho watch in stunned silence. The sheer impact of the attack is almost beyond comprehension. Jang In, experienced in battle tactics, comments that a mage should never get too close to an enemy. Yoon-ho, still fixated on the fight, mutters that perhaps Jinwoo underestimated his opponent. The battle, it seems, has taken a dangerous turn. Amid the rising dust and destruction, the ant warrior looks down at its opponent, confident in its overwhelming strength. It mocks Jinwoo, declaring that he is too weak and unworthy of the title of king. However, its triumphant moment is short-lived. As the dust begins to settle, the ant's expression shifts from arrogance to sheer disbelief. Jinwoo remains standing, completely unharmed. Not only has he withstood the attack, but he hasn't even moved an inch. His gaze sharpens, filled with a cold, unshaken determination. The injuries on his face mean nothing to him. With a slow, deliberate motion, he spits out a trace of blood from his mouth and fixes his piercing eyes on the ant. Jinwoo unleashes his skill, causing an intense energy to radiate from his hand. The sudden burst of power is overwhelming, forcing the ant to the ground. Before the creature can react, Jinwoo strikes, delivering a crushing blow straight to its head. The impact is so powerful that the ant is thrown backward, colliding violently with the tunnel wall. The surrounding area shakes from the force, sending debris flying in all directions. The hunters observing the fight are left speechless. One of them, Dongwoo, turns to his companions in disbelief, struggling to process what he just witnessed. He had always known Jinwoo was strong, but this level of raw power was completely unexpected. Despite the brutal hit, the ant is far from defeated. It roars furiously and charges forward once again, undeterred by the damage it has taken. Jinwoo watches closely, analyzing its movements. He realizes that the ant's resilience must come from its thick outer shell. The durability of its exoskeleton makes it an incredibly tough opponent. With a swift motion, Jinwoo activates his skill once more. As the ant lunges at him, he effortlessly blocks its attack, sending another powerful shockwave through the air. He immediately counters with a devastating punch to its torso. The ant retaliates by aiming another strike at Jinwoo's face, but he reacts quickly, delivering a crushing blow to its head. The impact is so severe that cracks begin to form on the creature's hardened exterior. The battle escalates as both fighters exchange relentless attacks, their immense power shaking the entire tunnel. Even those watching from a distance feel the sheer force of their clash. A nearby hunter, struggling to remain standing due to the waves of energy radiating from the fight, acknowledges just how intense the battle has become. Despite being a high-ranking hunter himself, the sheer pressure in the air is enough to make him unsteady. The ant, realizing its tough exterior is beginning to break, starts to question what it is up against. It cannot comprehend how Jinwoo, a mere human, is able to overpower it in terms of raw strength. The realization begins to dawn on the creature: it is losing. As Jinwoo prepares his next move, his energy surges once more, his eyes locked onto his opponent with unwavering intensity. Meanwhile, in another part of the battlefield, a man listens to the last recorded conversation of a fallen ally. The recording reveals that during a previous encounter, a powerful beast had questioned whether the man was the true king. The confident response now echoes in the listener's mind, but in the present moment, it is clear that the true balance of power has shifted. Back in the tunnel, Jinwoo and the ant simultaneously throw their punches. The collision sends shockwaves throughout the area and both fighters are pushed back. However, the ant quickly notices something alarming. Its exoskeleton is beginning to crack even further. Panic sets in as it wonders how this is even possible. Jinwoo wastes no time pressing his advantage. He dashes forward and delivers another punishing strike. The ant stumbles but suddenly launches an unexpected counterattack. From its mouth, it releases a sharp appendage, striking Jinwoo and pushing him back. At that moment, Jinwoo realizes the attack was coated with a deadly toxin. The poison, likely originating from a highly venomous creature the ant had consumed, is designed to paralyze its target instantly. With the added enhancement of mana, it has become even deadlier. Sensing an opportunity, the ant grows confident. It assumes that Jinwoo has been weakened and prepares for the finishing blow. Meanwhile, outside the battlefield, a group of individuals discusses the unfolding events. One of them, overcome with fear, insists that their side has no chance of victory. He trembles as he explains that the monster they are facing is beyond anything they have ever encountered. Even their strongest warriors would be helpless against such an opponent. Back in the tunnel, Jinwoo remains undeterred. Despite the poison, he manages to grab the ant's arm with a firm grip. The creature is shocked. It expected Jinwoo to be immobilized. But instead, Jinwoo counters with an earth-shattering punch to its face, sending the ant hurtling backward into the tunnel wall once more. The battle is far from over, but one thing is clear: the hunter standing before them is not an ordinary man. Jinwoo's system notifies him that the poison has been completely neutralized. At the same time, he senses a strange shift in the ant's emotions. At first, it seems pleased, as if it had expected the venom to incapacitate him. However, that satisfaction quickly turns into unease as Jinwoo remains unaffected. The once confident creature now begins to show signs of fear. Jinwoo realizes that his heightened perception is allowing him to feel the emotional responses of his opponent. As he assesses the situation, he also becomes aware of the growing tension among his allies. Haeyeon's condition is rapidly deteriorating, and the longer the battle drags on, the lower his chances of survival. Jinwoo knows he must finish the fight as soon as possible. Without hesitation, he propels himself into the air and aims a devastating kick at the ant. The force of the impact cracks the ground beneath him, but the ant narrowly evades the strike. Then, in an instant, it vanishes from sight. The sudden disappearance leaves the surrounding hunters in shock, unsure of where their foe has gone. But Jinwoo remains focused. He quickly looks up and spots the ant hovering above, having skillfully avoided his attack. In that moment, the creature comes to a realization: it cannot defeat him through sheer power alone. Recognizing that Jinwoo is resistant to poison and physically stronger, the ant decides to rely on its greatest weapon: speed. Its body begins to shrink, condensing its mass to enhance its agility. The creature boasts that brute force alone is meaningless if it cannot be caught. With its transformation complete, it launches forward at blinding speed. Jinwoo, gripping his daggers tightly, prepares himself for the incoming assault. The battle resumes at an even greater intensity. The ant moves like a blur, striking with precision, but Jinwoo's reflexes allow him to dodge each attack. In response, he counters with a swift slash, landing a hit on the ant's face. However, its hardened exoskeleton absorbs most of the damage, preventing a clean cut. Jinwoo presses forward, launching another attack, but the ant intercepts with its claws, pushing him back. Using the momentum, Jinwoo kicks off the tunnel wall, propelling himself forward at incredible speed. The two engage in a rapid exchange of blows, moving so fast that their movements become nearly imperceptible to the human eye. The ant, once confident in its unmatched speed, now finds itself struggling to keep up. It begins to question how Jinwoo, a mere human, is able to surpass it. Jinwoo analyzes the battle, realizing that this creature rivals the Demon King in strength. However, he has grown significantly since that battle. With new skills, better weapons, and multiple level-ups, he now possesses the power to end this fight. Observing that the ant's exoskeleton is beginning to crack under the pressure of his attacks, he seizes the opportunity. With a sharp burst of energy, Jinwoo unleashes a relentless series of slashes. Each strike lands with precision, tearing through the weakened exoskeleton. The ant, overwhelmed and barely able to defend itself, desperately tries to retreat. But Jinwoo is not about to let it escape. Activating his critical attack skill, he delivers a devastating combination of blows. A notification appears. His skill has reached its maximum level, evolving into a new ability: Mutilate. As the power surges through him, Jinwoo wastes no time in testing it out. With a single motion, he unleashes a flurry of slashes, each one cutting deep into the ant's body. The creature roars in agony as one of its arms is severed. Staggering back, the ant stares at Jinwoo, questioning whether it truly has no advantage over this opponent. Refusing to accept defeat, it lets out a powerful roar. The sound echoes through the battlefield, signaling its army to attack. In an instant, a swarm of ants begins charging toward Jinwoo, their aggression amplified by their leader's distress. Rather than showing concern, Jinwoo simply smiles. His reaction unsettles the ant, which cannot comprehend his confidence in the face of overwhelming numbers. Then, in a commanding tone, he summons his own forces. Shadows rise from the ground, forming a dark army led by his strongest warriors. The battlefield erupts into chaos as the two armies collide. Igris takes the lead, cutting down enemies with swift sword strikes. An orc guard tears an ant in half, while another delivers a crushing punch that shatters its opponent. The tide of battle shifts instantly, as the once dominant ant forces now find themselves overwhelmed. At that moment, Jinwoo calls forth another shadow, Tusk. Before sending him into battle, he issues a warning. No harm must come to any humans. If Tusk disobeys, he will never be summoned again. With the battlefield now in full chaos, the decisive battle between the two armies begins. Tusk acknowledges the command, signaling his understanding with a slight nod. Without hesitation, he activates his powerful skill, Hymn of Giants. A fiery glow begins to form in his mouth, growing rapidly in intensity. Within seconds, he releases a massive fireball toward the swarm of ants. As the flames explode upon impact, a devastating shockwave ripples through the battlefield, engulfing countless enemies in an inferno. The sheer power behind the attack burns through the tunnel walls, cutting through solid rock like a concentrated beam of energy. The spectacle leaves the observing hunters in complete disbelief. Taegu and Dongwook, watching from a distance, struggle to process what they are witnessing. The summoned entity standing before them does not resemble any beast they have seen before. Its overwhelming presence and destructive capability seem almost demonic, as if a force of nature has descended upon the battlefield to lay waste to everything in its path. The sight of the ants being reduced to ash under Tusk's flames only reinforces their awe and fear. The ant commander, watching the destruction unfold, finds itself unable to comprehend the situation. From the moment of its birth, it had always been the strongest. No creature had ever stood above it. The memories of past victories flood its mind. Powerful enemies it had slain, warriors who had fallen before its might. Figures like Kei, Ryuji, and Byung-gu had all been consumed, their strength adding to its own. It had believed itself to be invincible, destined to reign supreme. But now, everything it once believed is being shattered. Its burning comrades, the unrelenting march of Jinwoo's forces, and the overwhelming power displayed before its eyes shake its very core. And then, amidst the raging flames, Jinwoo steps forward. His figure is framed by the inferno, his eyes glowing with an ominous energy. The sheer presence he exudes forces the ant to confront a terrifying reality. It is no longer the predator, it is the prey. Panic sets in. A green aura begins to radiate from the ant's body as it instinctively activates an ability. Jinwoo immediately recognizes it, the unique healing skill once belonging to Byung-gu. The realization strikes him like a bolt of lightning. This creature is capable of absorbing the abilities of those it devours. Every fallen enemy has made it stronger, allowing it to continuously evolve. Despite its resilience, the ant's instincts scream at it to flee. Survival becomes its only priority. Without hesitation, it turns and attempts to escape, its body moving with desperate speed. However, Jinwoo does not intend to let it get away. His aura surges, and he activates one of his most powerful abilities, Commander's Touch. Above the battlefield, an enormous spectral hand materializes, radiating an overwhelming force. In an instant, it descends upon the fleeing ant with crushing power. The ground trembles as the hand slams into its target, pinning the creature beneath its immense weight. The impact is so powerful that the surrounding tunnel walls crack under the pressure. The battle is far from over, but for the first time in its existence, the ant commander experiences something it has never felt before: complete and utter helplessness. The ant, overwhelmed by the crushing force, struggles desperately to move. Its sharp claws dig into the ground as it tries to crawl away, its body battered and weakened. Every instinct tells it to escape, but before it can gain any distance, a shadow looms over it. In an instant, Jinwoo leaps forward, landing directly above the injured creature, blocking any chance of retreat. With precise and ruthless efficiency, Jinwoo activates his skill. A relentless storm of slashes rains down upon the ant. each strike cutting through its tough exoskeleton with ease. The rapid attacks leave the creature with no chance to defend itself. Within moments, its body collapses under the assault, and its movements cease entirely. A notification flashes before Jinwoo's eyes, confirming the enemy's defeat. As the system updates, he feels a surge of energy coursing through him. His level has increased twice. He takes a brief moment to glance at the fallen creature, ensuring that it is truly defeated. But his attention is quickly pulled away as a voice calls out urgently. Turning, Jinwoo sees Yunho rushing toward him, his expression filled with worry. The urgency in his voice makes Yunwoo realize something is wrong. Haeyeon's condition has worsened. Looking over at Haeyeon, Jinwoo immediately understands the gravity of the situation. Too much time has passed since the battle began, and Haeyeon's injuries are severe. Jinwoo quickly assesses his options. The fastest way to get help would be to use his teleportation skill, Shadow Exchange, but he knows it is still on cooldown. Even if it weren't, he has never attempted to transport another person using it before. The risk is too high. His next best option is to summon Kaizel and fly Haeyeon to safety. However, even at top speed, the journey may take too long. There is a real possibility that Haeyeon might not survive the trip. His mind races for another solution. He wonders if there are any surviving healers from the Blade Guild, but the chances seem slim. Time is running out, and frustration builds as he struggles to find an answer. Then, an idea strikes him. Without hesitation, Jinwoo turns to the cameraman who has been recording the battle. He issues a direct order to stop filming. The cameraman hesitates, confused by the sudden demand, but before he can question it further, Jinwoo repeats himself with a sharper tone, making it clear that refusal is not an option. Nervously, the cameraman complies and shuts off the recording. With the cameras no longer rolling, Jinwoo immediately commands his shadows to search for a specific body, Byung-gu. Yunho, standing nearby, is startled by the order. He begins to realize what Jinwoo is planning, but disbelief holds him back from voicing it. The search does not take long. An orc shadow soldier soon returns, carrying what remains of Byung-gu's body. Jinwoo observes the condition of the corpse, noting that the ant had already torn through it. He knows what he is about to attempt is uncertain, but it is his only hope. Jinwoo steadies himself and activates his ability. A notification appears in his system. The shadow extraction skill can be used on Byung-gu's body. A wave of relief washes over him. This might actually work. Without wasting another second, he speaks the command, and dark shadows rise, swirling around the lifeless body. But then an unexpected message appears. Shadow extraction failed. Jinwoo's eyes widen in disbelief. He tries again, pouring his energy into the command, but once more, the system denies him. The extraction has failed again. Frustration builds as Jinwoo contemplates the reason behind this. His current skill level should be more than enough for a successful extraction. Then it dawns on him. Byung-gu himself is resisting. Despite being dead, his will remains strong, opposing the idea of becoming a shadow soldier. Jinwoo realizes that Byung-gu, a healer who dedicated his life to saving others, may see this transformation as something unnatural or immoral. Nearby, Iron watches in silence, confused by the repeated failures. But Jinwoo is not willing to give up. His priority is saving Haeyeon, and if Byung-gu is the key to that, then he must try once more. With unwavering determination, Jinwoo activates Shadow Extraction one final time. The dark energy envelops Byung-gu's body once again, and this time something shifts. The resistance fades, and the process completes. A hand emerges from the ground, fingers curling as the transformation finalizes. Byung-gu, now a shadow soldier, rises to his feet. Yunho, witnessing the impossible, is frozen in shock. His voice wavers as he tries to process what just happened. The realization dawns upon him. Jinwoo has the power to command the dead. The sheer weight of this discovery leaves him speechless. With Byung-gu now standing beside him, Jinwoo's plan has succeeded. But there is no time to celebrate. The real battle has just begun, and Haeyeon's life still hangs in the balance. As Jinwoo stood among the hunters, a tense silence filled the tunnel. Jang Yen observed him carefully, trying to process what had just happened. The ability to control the dead was something unheard of, and it left those around him with mixed emotions. Don Wook, another experienced hunter, couldn't shake the thought that Jinwoo was no ordinary summoner. His power exceeded anything they had witnessed before. Before anyone could say more, the shadow of Byung-gu moved toward Hye, extending its hands over her weakened body. A faint glow surrounded her as a healing spell was cast, slowly restoring her condition. Yun-ho, watching the scene unfold, couldn't believe what he was seeing. The familiar energy of Byung-gu's healing abilities was at work, yet it was coming from a shadow. Jinwoo stood quietly, observing the moment. Without needing to give an order, Byung-gu's shadow had acted on its own to help someone in need. This proved something to Jinwoo. Some part of Byung-gu's warm heart had remained within his shadow form. Even though his body had been turned into a summon, the kindness he had in life hadn't disappeared completely. However, Yun-ho closed his eyes, shaking his head. He understood the truth. Byung-gu was gone. This shadow was no longer the man they once knew. Jinwoo silently agreed. The cameraman, who had been recording everything, was left speechless. He finally understood why Jinwoo had insisted on turning off the camera earlier. If the public found out about his ability, it would lead to chaos. Even among hunters, such an overwhelming power was frightening. Jong-in, who had been observing Jinwoo throughout the raid, couldn't deny that his strength was growing at an alarming rate. It was almost terrifying to think about how much stronger he could become. Yun-ho finally spoke up, acknowledging how useful Byung-gu's healing abilities were. However, he made a sincere request. He didn't want to see this power used in battle again. There was something unsettling about seeing a former comrade turned into a summon, even if it was for the right reasons. Jinwoo considered his words and then made a decision. He approached Byung-gu's shadow and chose to release him. As the dark mist surrounding the figure faded, Byung-gu's shadow looked at Jinwoo one last time before disappearing. The hunters stood in silence, watching the moment as though they were bidding farewell to their fallen friend one last time. Yun-ho let out a deep sigh of relief, thanking Jinwoo for making that choice. Outside the tunnel, a helicopter arrived to evacuate the hunters. As they emerged from the darkness, Yun-ho carried Byung-gu's lifeless body, while Don Wook helped Hae-in, who was now recovering. Before getting on the helicopter, Jinwoo informed Yun-ho that he wouldn't be leaving just yet. He still had unfinished business. Understanding the situation, Yun-ho didn't argue. The battle wasn't over. Countless flying ants still hovered in the sky, and someone needed to clear them out. Without wasting any time, Jinwoo summoned Kazel, his massive dragon-like shadow. As the enormous creature appeared, Yun-ho and the other hunters were momentarily shocked by its sheer size. With a powerful roar, Kazel took to the sky, carrying Jinwoo as they prepared to eliminate the remaining threats. Meanwhile, on a ship at sea, the remaining Japanese hunters were still struggling to process the devastating events of the raid. Hashino, who had barely survived, was in a state of shock. The powerful ant that had wiped out Ryuji and the others was unlike anything he had ever seen. To him, it wasn't just a monster, it was a nightmare-given form. He tried to warn the others, explaining that they wouldn't understand unless they had witnessed its power firsthand. He doubted that anyone could stand against such a creature, believing the mission had already failed. However, Sugimoto, another high-ranking hunter, interrupted him. Sugimoto revealed that the latest information from the South Korean headquarters confirmed the raid was over. The powerful beast had already been defeated. Hashino was stunned, unable to comprehend how that could be possible. But Sugimoto assured him the news was reliable. As they continued their journey, a crew member suddenly reported that the remaining ants were scattering. Sugimoto took charge, issuing orders to prepare for battle. Although the main threat had been eliminated, there were still lingering enemies that needed to be dealt with. The remaining ships braced for the approaching swarm. Back inside the underground nest, Jinwoo's shadow army was still at work, clearing out the last of the ants. His mage-type shadows unleashed powerful fire magic, incinerating the unhatched eggs scattered across the chamber. As he watched the destruction, Jinwoo noticed something interesting. He was gaining experience points from destroying the eggs. It was an unexpected bonus. Taking a moment to check his inventory, he realized there were many items he had yet to sort through. Among them was something he had nearly forgotten, a massive weapon called the Demon King's Longsword. This powerful weapon, which he had obtained after defeating Baron, provided a significant boost to his attack power. Curious about its abilities, he decided to test it. Swinging the sword, he activated its special effect, Storm of White Flames. Immediately, a burst of lightning and fire rained down, destroying dozens of ant eggs at once. Impressed by the weapon's destructive force, he realized it would be a waste to leave it sitting in his inventory. The perspective then shifted to a quiet room, where two men were watching a live broadcast of the raid. One of them, standing near the screen, asked his companion, "Mr. Brennan?" what he thought of Jinwoo. Mr. Brennan, the director of the Federal Bureau of Hunters, sighed as he leaned back in his chair. He admitted that he had been watching Jinwoo closely, losing track of time in the process. His companion, Michael Connor, already knew the answer. That was the reason he had come to Brennan's house at such a late hour. He explained that Jinwoo's ability to summon hundreds of powerful creatures made him truly unique. A talent like his couldn't be ignored. Connor then made an interesting observation. South Korea was too small for someone like Jinwoo. His potential was far beyond what any single country could contain. As they continued discussing Jinwoo's future, the events of the raid were still unfolding, with Jinwoo himself standing at the center of it all. Late at night, in a dimly lit office, two men sat across from each other, reviewing classified files. The room was filled with tension, as the topic of discussion was no ordinary individual. One of them, a man with a commanding presence, flipped open a folder and placed it on the table. The name written on the file was Sung Il-hwan, a figure tied to a mysterious incident that had shaken the Bureau a few months prior. The other man, who had been watching a broadcast of recent events, leaned forward with interest. He listened carefully as his companion explained that Sung Il-hwan had been found inside an A-rank dungeon on the East Coast. The discovery had been made by an elite hunter named James, who was initially uncertain whether the man was truly human or some form of advanced magical creature. However, upon further investigation, Sung Il-hwan had identified himself as a South Korean hunter. The Bureau had kept a record of him, but what stood out the most was a shocking revelation. Sung Il-hwan was the father of Sung Jinwoo, the hunter who had single-handedly changed the course of the recent raid. The timing of this information was crucial. Jinwoo's name had yet to make waves internationally, meaning this was the perfect opportunity to act. The first man, known as Mr. Brennan, took a deep breath, contemplating the implications. He acknowledged the potential, but also the risks. The United States had long been an ally of South Korea, and forcibly recruiting another S-rank hunter from their nation would strain that relationship. They had already taken one hunter, Hwang Dong-soo, and repeating such an act would be a direct insult to their allies. Michael, his companion, leaned in with a determined expression. He asked a simple but important question. Was Jinwoo's strength not worth the risk? Brennan considered this, recalling the overwhelming power Jinwoo had displayed. After a moment of silence, he asked Michael if he truly believed he could handle the situation. With unwavering confidence, Michael assured him that he would give it his best shot. Meanwhile, deep within the underground tunnels where the battle had taken place, Jinwoo received a notification from his system. He had reached a new milestone, level 100.0. Holding the longsword in his grip, he reflected on the journey that had led him to this point. Each battle, each enemy defeated, had brought him closer to this level of power. But his work was not yet finished. His attention shifted to the lifeless body of the massive ant beast, the creature that had given the raid team so much trouble. Its presence alone had wiped out some of the strongest hunters. Now, it was nothing more than a corpse. But Jinwoo had the ability to turn it into something more. He extended his hand over the fallen monster and uttered a single word, "Arise." At that moment, an unusual sensation washed over him. Everything turned dark. There was no sound, no feeling, only emptiness. Jinwoo found himself momentarily disoriented, wondering if the extraction had failed. Just as he was about to question what had gone wrong, a deep voice echoed from behind him. "I'm back." Turning around, Jinwoo saw the shadow of the ant beast kneeling before him. A notification from the system confirmed that the extraction had been successful. Relief washed over him as he observed his new summon. The aura it exuded was overwhelming, a clear indication of its strength. As he studied it, the system provided additional information. The shadow had a new rank. It was not a standard summon, nor an elite or knight-class soldier. Instead, it had achieved the rank of general. Jinwoo had never encountered this before, making it his strongest shadow soldier to date. Although he had expected this given the monster's strength and life, the confirmation still filled him with satisfaction. He had gained a powerful new warrior for his army. But his work wasn't finished. His gaze shifted toward the lifeless body of the Ant Queen. She had been the source of the hive, the ruler of the island's monstrous inhabitants. If her shadow could be extracted, it would undoubtedly be a valuable asset. However, before he could proceed, the newly revived shadow of the ant beast spoke again. "My king, I need a name." Jinwoo was momentarily taken aback. Although his shadow soldiers had always displayed unwavering loyalty, very few had spoken to him directly. The only ones who could speak were those of higher ranks, such as Tusk. Now, the ant beast was showing the same ability. Curious, Jinwoo asked why it was capable of speech. The creature responded simply, "I always could." This revelation made Jinwoo think. He considered his other shadows. Iron, once human, had lost his ability to speak. Even Min Byung-gu, who had been an exceptional healer in life, remained silent in death. The only other shadow he had encountered with speech was Tusk, and now the ant beast. It became clear, rank must have played a role. The higher the rank, the more personality and intelligence the shadow retained. This meant the ant beast had not only been strong, but had also possessed an advanced level of intelligence, even before its transformation. Jinwoo took a moment before deciding on a name, one that would suit the mighty warrior standing before him. As the underground chamber remained filled with the remnants of the battle, Jinwoo prepared for his next move. The war on Jeju Island had come to an end, but this was only the beginning of something far greater. After confirming its allegiance, the newly resurrected ant beast kneels before Jinwoo, showing absolute loyalty. It does not see itself as a defeated enemy, but rather as a reborn warrior who now serves under a stronger master. Overwhelmed with joy, the ant beast expresses its devotion, vowing to follow Jinwoo for eternity. As a gesture of submission, it asks for a name. Jinwoo takes a moment to consider. Giving it a simple name like ant or bug wouldn't suit a creature of its power. Instead, he recalls a novel he once read about ants and decides to name it Baru. The system immediately registers the name, marking Baru as an official member of Jinwoo's shadow army. With that done, Jinwoo turns his attention to the Ant Queen's lifeless body. He prepares to extract her shadow, and as soon as the process begins, an unusual reaction spreads through the colony. The remaining ants, who had already fallen under Jinwoo's control after their deaths, suddenly appear restless. Their connection to him weakens, as if something fundamental has changed. Confused by this development, Jinwoo seeks an explanation. Baru, now standing by his side, explains that the Ant Queen had always possessed the natural authority to command her colony. Even in death, her presence still exerted influence over the ants. Now that she had been resurrected as a shadow, that authority was returning, but instead of unifying them, it was causing instability. The ants were torn between following Jinwoo and their former ruler. Realizing this, Jinwoo analyzes the situation. If the Ant Queen was primarily a leader rather than a fighter, her revival might not be beneficial. He also notices something odd. Her mana levels are surprisingly low for a creature of her rank. Baru clarifies that the Queen's power was never focused on battle. Instead, she had used her mana entirely for reproduction, ensuring the survival of the colony rather than engaging in combat herself. Jinwoo quickly comes to a decision. There is no need for two commanders in his army. Since Baru is already more powerful and completely loyal to him, keeping the queen would be unnecessary. Without hesitation, he cancels the extraction, allowing her to remain at rest. With that issue resolved, Jinwoo shifts his focus back to the battlefield. His army had been gathering essence stones from the defeated enemies, but he decides that they should not keep them. Instead, the stones will be used to rebuild Jeju Island and compensate for the destruction caused by the ant invasion. Without questioning his order, the shadow soldiers discard the stones, leaving them for reconstruction efforts. Jinwoo, however, keeps one stone, the essence extracted from Baru. It radiates an immense energy far greater than anything he has acquired before. But before he can dwell on it further, another issue arises. He still needs to eliminate the remaining ants that survived the battle. Curious about their numbers, Jinwoo turns to Baru for an estimate. The former leader of the ants responds, revealing that before the attack, the total number of ants was 8,700. Despite the large-scale battle, around 4,000 still remain. Jinwoo is surprised. He had believed the colony was nearly wiped out. The realization that so many are still alive prompts him to think carefully about his next move. He considers sending his army, but before making a decision, he asks Baru whether he could handle the remaining ants alone. In response, Baru's aura flares with power. He stands tall, ready to unleash his full strength, waiting for Jinwoo's command. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, multiple hunter guilds are mobilizing. The Knights Guild, led by their commander, spots the approaching wave of ants and prepares for combat. Warships stationed along the coast launch explosive projectiles, while mages unleash energy blasts in an attempt to slow the swarm. Every available force is deployed in a coordinated effort to stop the invasion. In another location, a hunter monitoring the battlefield confirms that the ants are rapidly advancing northward. They are heading directly toward the Knights Guild's defensive line, where elite hunters stand ready. The leader of the Hunters Guild issues an order for his team to brace for impact as the massive swarm descends. At the same time, members of the Fiend Guild prepare for battle. Their vice guild master commands them to destroy every ant in sight. One of the guild members comments that these creatures possess the strength of B-rank monsters, making them formidable foes. The hunters form battle formations, knowing that a single mistake could cost them their lives. However, one member, Minzung, struggles to hide his fear. Despite being an A-rank hunter, he is clearly terrified. Another guildmate silently observes his trembling hands, recognizing his lack of confidence despite his high rank. Elsewhere, a different battlefront is forming. Juhee and Mr. Song stand near the shore, watching the ants as they emerge from the water and charge toward them. Juhee voices her concern, wondering if they truly stand a chance against such overwhelming numbers. Suddenly, before the ants can reach them, a dark figure moves at an impossible speed. With a single motion, it slices through the oncoming wave of enemies, tearing them apart effortlessly. The attack is so fast that Juhee can barely comprehend what just happened. She turns to Mr. Song, asking if he saw what it was. Mr. Song, equally stunned, struggles to find an answer. The sheer speed of the creature was beyond anything he had ever seen before. Its movement was too swift to track with the naked eye. As the dust settles, the identity of the attacker is revealed. Jinwoo's newly resurrected shadow, General Baru. His overwhelming power leaves the hunters in complete shock as he effortlessly clears a path through the invading ants. The battlefield is left in silence, with everyone struggling to process what they just witnessed. Baru, standing among the remains of his fallen enemies, awaits his next command. The battle is far from over, and Jinwoo's army is only just beginning to unleash its full strength. A detailed map of South Korea is shown, marking the locations of various guilds. The operation to eliminate the ants has been ongoing for 2 days in the southern regions. However, the threat is not limited to South Korea. Swarms of ants have also been spotted near China's coastal waters, where naval forces are stationed to intercept them. On one of the ships, the captain watches in disbelief as the second wave of ants moves within their firing range. A crew member mentions that they have been unable to sleep for 2 days, constantly on alert. Another officer suggests they wait for orders to open fire, but the captain hesitates, noticing something unusual. He realizes that someone has stepped forward to handle the situation alone. A lone figure stands on the surface of the ocean, 2 swords strapped to his back, completely unfazed by the countless ants surrounding him. He observes the swarming creatures, remarking on their endless numbers before confidently declaring that he will send every single one of them to the ocean's depths. With a powerful aura surrounding him, he unsheathes his blades and swings them with immense force, creating massive energy slashes. These devastating attacks tear through the waves of ants, causing explosions that annihilate them instantly. As the battle unfolds, the swordsman scoffs at how weak these ants are, commenting that if this were the same type of ant that once fought a certain powerful hunter, it would have been a much more interesting fight. After swiftly dealing with the threat, he puts away his weapons, lamenting the lack of challenge. The lifeless bodies of the ants sink into the ocean as he departs. Meanwhile, across the world, in the United States, a woman and a man are watching the battle through a screen. She turns to the man sitting across from her and asks for his thoughts on the hunter named Jinwoo. She mentions that there is a connection between Jinwoo and Hwang Dan-soo, a member of the Scavenger Guild. There are suspicions that Jinwoo might have killed Hwang's older brother, which has fueled Hwang's desire for revenge. The man, revealed to be Thomas Andre, the leader of the Scavenger Guild, listens to her comments and smirks. He dismisses the notion that their conflict is simply a matter of revenge. Given recent events, he states that meeting Jingu now would be difficult, which is unfortunate, as he had looked forward to encountering him in person. As one of the world's most powerful hunters, Thomas commands a guild filled with elite S-rank hunters, often deploying members to other countries to deal with gates beyond local capabilities. Thomas's expression darkens when the conversation shifts to potential conflicts. The woman, identified as Laura, asks how he would react if his guild were to clash with Jinwoo. Thomas replies with a menacing tone, making it clear that no one interferes with what belongs to him. To emphasize his point, he crushes the remote control in his hand, declaring that not even the US government has the right to challenge his authority. Back in South Korea, on Jeju Island, the Knights Guild is preparing for the third night of their ongoing mission. Their leader, Jang Sung, leads his team into a tunnel, accompanied by hunters and soldiers tasked with collecting essence stones while remaining on high alert for any lingering threats. As they proceed, Jang Sung, casually smoking a cigarette, shares a story about a man who had terrible luck. A younger guild member, Yoon Tae, asks about the story, and Jang Sung explains that this man trained his entire life to become an Olympic champion. He followed a strict regimen, ensured he passed every test and was in peak condition before the competition. However, just before his event, a mana evaluation revealed that he was an awakened being, which disqualified him from participating. When Yoon Tae realizes that Jang Sung is talking about himself, the guild master becomes emotional, reminiscing about how he abandoned his dream and instead devoted himself to building the greatest guild in the country. Their conversation is interrupted when they stumble upon a massive cache of top-quality essence stones. Overwhelmed by excitement, Jang Sung exclaims that these stones will help him achieve his goal. However, one of the female hunters warns him against embezzling, while Yoon Tae can't hide his amazement at the discovery. Believing the area to be safe, the team relaxes slightly, but without warning, an ant emerges from the shadows of the tunnel. Jang Sung swiftly decapitates it, assuring his comrades that it was just a lone straggler. However, the situation takes a sudden turn when Yoon Tae calls out his name urgently. The soldiers react immediately, sensing something unusual. A mysterious figure appears from the darkness, clad in armor made of animal hides, exuding an overwhelming presence. The hunters quickly realize that he is not one of them. Tension fills the air as they try to determine if this stranger is human or something else entirely. One of the female hunters warns against attacking recklessly, as the figure does not seem to be a magical beast. Jang Sung demands to know his identity and warns that they will open fire if he refuses to leave. However, the stranger speaks in an unfamiliar language, revealing sharp teeth and glowing yellow eyes. Jang Sung's face betrays his unease as he wonders whether this man is speaking the language of beasts. Suddenly, a sharp snap of fingers echoes through the tunnel, and within seconds, every hunter and soldier collapses, rendered unconscious. Another figure steps forward, a man with white hair and blue skin. The beast-like figure, who had been leading the group, glares at his companion and demands to know why he did that. The white-hailed man calmly explains that there is no need for unnecessary bloodshed, and that putting them to sleep was the most efficient course of action. Their conversation reveals that they are searching for a specific power, which they are certain is present in this place. The white-hailed figure expresses his curiosity about why a particular individual is helping humans, but the beast-like man shrugs off the question, suggesting that if he wants answers, he should ask directly. As they prepare to leave, the white-hailed man creates a blue portal similar to a dungeon gate. The beast-like warrior senses something and remarks that one of their targets might be here. When he suggests eliminating them before leaving, the white-tailed figure refuses, stating that the situation is best left in someone else's hands. Sensing hesitation, the beast-like man accuses him of not wanting to get involved. But the white-tailed figure simply steps into the gate without responding. As he disappears, the beast-like warrior mutters under his breath, calling him a coward. With the others gone, the beast-like man turns his attention to Jang Sung, who is still unconscious. Deciding that there is no reason to create more trouble, he slashes his claws before stepping into a red portal that appears before him. Without hesitation, he vanishes, leaving no trace of his presence behind. This marks the end of the Jeju Island conflict. The events that follow lead into a new chapter where Jinwoo encounters a figure named Norma Selner, a special individual working for the American government who possesses the unique ability to enhance the powers of awakened beings. This meeting sets the stage for a major shift in Jinwoo's journey.